Chapter 23-26. Quickly bring me to see the elder. That snow cloud sect disciple shouted urgently. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD, senior brother. What happened to you? How did you suffer such heavy injuries? Quick, no more nonsense. Quickly bring me to see the elder. As he spoke, that blood cloud sect disciple even spat out a mouthful of black blood. His junior brother naturally did not dare to tarry as he directly supported him and rushed into the great hall. At this moment, the blood cloud sect's grand elder had already arrived. How did you end up like this? The grand elder quickly came to the side of that blood cloud sect disciple, preparing to treat his injuries. However, that disciple would not agree at all as he directly took out a resource from his spatial ring. Grand elder, I accidentally entered a mysterious place. This is the resource I obtained there. However, the poisonous chi there is confusing. Also, it seems that someone discovered it first. This disciple is useless, only being able to obtain this resource. Also, this is a map of that place. This disciple had originally prepared 2 copies, but one of them was lost in the city. As that disciple finished speaking, he spat out another mouthful of black blood, directly dying on the spot. How could that grand elder still be in the mood to care about that disciple now? He was completely attracted by the resource that the disciple had brought back. This is the Wutong Divine Stone that can only be produced in ancient secret realms. Heavens, it's actually the Wutong Divine Stone. Quickly gather all the elders and have all the disciples return to the sect. Also, search the entire city. We must not let the other map be taken away by anyone. Very quickly, the entire Blood Cloud sect entered a state of anxiety. At this time, Yi Xian's plan could already be said to have succeeded. Groups of Blood Cloud sect disciples searched the city unceasingly. Unfortunately, apart from letting everyone in Blood Cloud City know about the map, it was completely useless. Yi Xian had plenty of maps. Very quickly, map after map rapidly appeared in Blood Cloud City. While those of the Blood Cloud sect were searching without restraint, it was completely useless. Chief, we can't wait any longer. We must act now. Once someone takes the initiative, the treasure will be taken away by others. That's right, Chief. According to that disciple's report, that place has already been discovered. If we still don't act, I'm afraid that there won't be anything left. This is the ancient mystery dimension. A group of elders surrounded the chief of the Blood Cloud clan, incomparably excited. Of course I know, but the news from the Li family hasn't arrived yet. What do you mean by leaving home or not? Chief, what have our Blood Cloud clan obtained from leaving home for so long? Now that the ancient mystery land has appeared, if we still hesitate, we will never have the chance to grow stronger. Good. Inform the disciples to move out. Follow the directions on the map and kill them. The chief of the Blood Cloud clan finally made up his mind. However, the news had already spread. Map after map was sent back to the various forces. Yi Xian had originally only wanted to create some chaos so that the Blood Cloud clan would make their move sooner. Unexpectedly, however, it had actually caused several powers to simultaneously rush towards the location of the extermination organization. Of course, Yi Xian would not miss this feast of slaughter. Therefore, Yi Xian and Xian Yi mingled in the crowd and headed towards the annihilation organization. The people of the Annihilation Organization would never have thought that their secret base would actually be discovered by others. Moreover, those who had gone there at the beginning were only loose cultivators with average strength. Therefore, they had directly dealt with them as they had done before. However, apart from strengthening the confidence of the Blood Cloud clan and the other forces, it had no other use at all. Therefore, war was inevitable. This was the headquarters of the Annihilation Organization. They could not easily give it up. Even if they wanted to give it up, they had to at least transport the resources they had collected here away. It was a pity that they could not. The people of the Blood Cloud clan had been schemed against by Yi Xian right from the start. The moment they appeared, they had brought a large number of people with them. The disciples of the Annihilation Organization had tried to rush out several times, but their intelligence had been destroyed. After being killed, their resources had been exposed, which had only further aroused the battle intent of the Blood Cloud clan. Yi Xian was calm and unruffled in the crowd. Occasionally, he would kill a few disciples of the Blood Cloud clan or the Annihilation Organization. No one would notice him. No one would know that this was all part of a well-planned scheme. The Annihilation Organization had already been suppressed by the people sent by Mi Yan once. Naturally, they would think that the people sent to annihilate them this time. The Blood Cloud clan, on the other hand, felt that the Annihilation Organization had already obtained the treasures and would naturally not tell the truth. Therefore, the two forces did not even bother to explain to each other. The war lasted for several months. Almost every day, the Blood Cloud clan would organize people to attack. The Annihilation Organization would naturally defend. The Annihilation Organization had plundered so many resources. Therefore, even ordinary disciples would have a lot of resources on them. Killing a disciple of the Annihilation Organization would undoubtedly earn them a lot. Ding! Host has broken through. Current level is 2nd grade lower true god. Unknowingly, Yi Xian had advanced by another level. After all, Yi Xian would naturally not waste the spatial rings of those who had been killed by Yi Xian. Therefore, after slowly accumulating, Yi Xian had actually advanced by a level. At this time, the war between the Blood Cloud clan and the Annihilation Organization could be said to be white hot. The Blood Cloud clan had already discovered the entrance to the secret realm and was certain that it was the ancient secret realm. The Annihilation Organization would naturally not allow the Blood Cloud clan to enter. After all, they were an organization that could not be exposed to the light. Therefore, they could only fight. During this period of time, the total number of casualties on both sides was probably in the tens of thousands. However, the war still showed no signs of stopping. Yi Xian had been waiting for that mysterious person to come out and fight the chief of the Blood Cloud clan. Unfortunately, that mysterious person was like a coward, not coming out no matter what. However, Yi Xian naturally did not mind. Even if it took a few more months, or even a few more years, Yi Xian would not mind. It was fine as long as they could annihilate the Annihilation Organization. Besides, after all, Yi Xian could also train. As time passed, that mysterious person finally could not hide any longer and directly rushed out with his people. Blood Cloud clan, don't push us too far. We have already said that this is the base of our clan, not some ancient secret realm. Do you really want to fight to the death with us? Haha, you say that this is the base of your clan? Sure. Then, how about letting us in to take a look? Both sides drew their swords, but did not know that Yi Xian had already stealthily moved towards the base of the Annihilation Organization from another location. These restrictions were of no threat to Yi Xian at all. In fact, Yi Xian would even add various concealment restrictions on top of the original restrictions. At this time, the elites of the Annihilation Organization were all outside competing with the Blood Cloud clan. This was the best time for Yi Xian to sneak in. The concealment function of the Wings of the Gods had already been activated. Chapter 23-27. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Yi Xian advanced stealthily without any hindrance. However, it was only after he entered that he realized how big the secret territory of annihilation was. Yi Xian first entered a barren land. If not for the fact that he occasionally bumped into a few disciples of annihilation, Yi Xian would have suspected that there was nothing here. However, as he ventured deeper, he finally arrived at the core of Annihilation's stronghold. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. This was a place made up of tens of thousands of palaces. Furthermore, each palace was cultivated independently in the void. They were only connected by pontoon bridges. Furthermore, each of these palaces was protected by a special restriction. Furthermore, most of the palaces had guardian mythical beasts. Of course, the mythical beasts used by Annihilation were all demon gods. It was only now that Yi Xian understood why Annihilation kept resurrecting demon gods. Their fundamental purpose was to use them as their guardian demon gods. Fortunately, most of the disciples of Annihilation had already left. Therefore, even if Yi Xian sneaked in, he would not be discovered. At this point, Yi Xian had already found a disciple of Annihilation. This person's cultivation level was at the upper grade 9 true god realm. He could be considered to have a higher cultivation level among the disciples who stayed behind. Yi Xian stealthily approached that person. However, the moment he approached, that person discovered him. Who's there? Who's there? The disciple suddenly looked in Yi Xian's direction. Yi Xian had used the concealment function of the Wings of the Gods. Logically speaking, It should have been impossible for Annihilation to discover him. However, someone had discovered him. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Either there was a special detection restriction here, or this disciple of Annihilation had some kind of detection ability. However, regardless of the reason, Yi Xian did not care. Since this person had discovered him, Yi Xian did not hesitate. Spiritual control. Ding. Congratulations to the host for successfully controlling the target. This guy's cultivation level was lower than Yi Xian's, and he was scheming against Yi Xian, so how could Yi Xian resist? Tell me the situation here. Tell me everything you know. Yes, master. The disciple that was controlled by Yi Xian's spiritual sense didn't hesitate in the slightest and directly told Yi Xian everything he knew. It turned out that every palace here had a special restriction. These restrictions protected these palaces, and some could even communicate with the guardian demon gods. Every Annihilation stronghold had a very important place. Fey God's Temple, Skill Imparting Hall, Treasure Hall, Divine Ability Hall, and Punishment Hall. The Wuji Palace was the core of the Annihilation organization. The Treasure Hall was naturally where the treasures were stored. The Supernatural Powers Hall was where the Annihilation organization stored their supernatural powers. These two places were the most heavily guarded. Even the upper-class True God disciple controlled by Yi Xian was not qualified to enter. Next were the Skill Imparting Hall and Punishment Hall. Their functions were similar, and they were both places where supernatural powers were imparted. However, one was a place where learning was allowed, while the other was only allowed to learn if one had made a contribution. Furthermore, if one made a mistake, one would be punished in the Punishment Hall. These two places were heavily guarded because a large number of disciples gathered at any time, and the protective restrictions were very strong. As for the Fey God's Temple, nominally, it was the easiest place to defend, but in reality, it was the most dangerous place. The resurrected Fey gods of the Annihilation organization would gather here to be tamed. Not all of these Yao gods would be so obedient, so it was inevitable that they would be tamed. The ancient Fey gods had always been the Annihilation organization's biggest helper, and also its strongest fighter. Different ancient Fey gods had different supernatural powers, so naturally, there were differences in their combat strength. Some ancient Fey gods even had special supernatural powers, so they were extremely dangerous. The Annihilation organization used a very special method to tame these ancient Fey gods. At the same time, they would also modify them and turn them into their most powerful trump cards. One could imagine how dangerous the Fey God Temple was. The 5 Great Halls were the core of the Annihilation organization. However, other than the 5 Great Halls, there were also some special halls. For example, the Totem Divine Beast Hall was specially used to imprison the Totem Divine Beasts. The Blood Sacrifice Slave Hall was used to imprison people who were captured by the Annihilation organization and were prepared to be used as blood sacrifices at any time. Wait a minute. Yi Xian only needed to listen to these introductions to know that the Annihilation organization was extraordinarily strict. After learning the information he wanted from this disciple, Yi Xian killed him casually. Then, he continued to move forward. Of course, this time, Yi Xian already had a clear plan and a clear roadmap in mind. After all, this disciple was only an upper-class true god, so he did not have a comprehensive understanding of the base. There were also some places that this disciple did not even know what to do. As for these mysterious areas, Yi Xian put them last. His first target now was the Annihilation Organization's treasure hall. This was because Yi Xian was very clear that as long as he could loot the Annihilation Organization's treasure hall, he would make a huge profit. At the same time, he could also deal a heavy blow to the Annihilation Organization's stronghold. With a target in mind, Yi Xian naturally would not stop. In an instant, he rushed out. Along the way, he avoided all the dangerous halls and the Annihilation Organization's disciples. Under the watchful eyes of countless enemies, Yi Xian directly arrived at the treasure hall. Is this the Annihilation Organization's treasure hall? There doesn't seem to be any danger, Yi Xian said indifferently. This was because he had already arrived outside the treasure hall. However, he did not expect to encounter danger as soon as he stepped in. He saw that the sculptures, which were originally just for decoration, had all come to life. Moreover, the moment these guys woke up, they launched a frenzied attack on Yi Xian. Damn it, these damn things have no vitality at all. They are all puppets. Yi Xian was quite depressed. It was only when these things attacked him that he realized that they were all puppets. Ding! System notification. The host has entered a special space, the puppet domain. Please be careful. The puppet domain was a protective domain set up by special means. In this domain, all the puppets had the special effect of being immortal and indestructible. Even if they were completely crushed, they would be reborn. The way to break it was to destroy the restriction core. System, search for the restriction core here. Yi Xian directly ordered the system. After all, it would be difficult for him to find it himself. The Annihilation Organization's disciples had turned all the untamed ancient demon gods, as well as the powerhouses who had been captured from the outside, into puppets. These puppets had extremely strong offensive instincts. As long as they detected that someone who did not have a peer token or was not a disciple of the Annihilation Organization had intruded, they would fight to the death. Chapter 23-28. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. This time, Yi Xian did not summon the 1,000 beast sword servants. Instead, he relied on himself to kill the puppets. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. This was because Yi Xian knew that these damned puppets were useless even after Yi Xian summoned the 1,000 beast sword servants. Instead, he used the 1,000 beast sword servants first. After all, Yi Xian still had many places to go. Boom, boom, boom. Every time Yi Xian swung his sword, he killed a puppet. However, within the puppet domain, these puppets were undying existences. Even if Yi Xian killed them, it wouldn't affect them in the slightest. No matter how much Yi Xian killed, no matter how thoroughly he destroyed them, it wouldn't be long before a new puppet appeared. Ding! System notification. Detection failed. Ding! System notification. Increased detection area failed. Ding! System notification. Enhancing detection. Detection successful. Finally, the system gave him the core of the puppet territory. Yi Xian looked at the core in a daze. Yi Xian did not expect the core to be the base of a statue. There were tens of thousands of statue bases here, and every one of them looked exactly the same. Other than some differences in size, there were no other differences. If it was not for the system's detection, Yi Xian would not have guessed it. However, now that his target was clear, Yi Xian would not stay behind. He immediately rushed towards the base of the statue. How dare you trespass into my treasure pavilion? Suddenly, a voice sounded. Puppets could not speak, so the voice naturally came from a disciple of the Annihilation Organization. At that moment, a disciple of the Annihilation Organization appeared on the base of the statue. Ding! System notification. Target set. Lower rank 5 Divine Lord. Divine Lord? It seemed that this guy was the elder of the Annihilation Organization, who had stayed behind to guard the treasure pavilion. Yi Xian did not want to waste time with this person. He immediately rushed forward, the god-slaying sword in his hand swinging, an array of sword light shot out. However, that person did not even move. With a wave of his hand, a puppet appeared in front of the sword light. It absorbed all of Yi Xian's attack. This guy was actually able to control these puppets at will within the puppet domain. As long as they were within the range of the puppet territory, all of them could appear at his will. Yi Xian's translation. After missing his first attack, that person naturally, he would not give Yi Xian a second. In an instant, hundreds of puppets appeared in front of Yi Xian. Without warning, Yi Xian, they surrounded and attacked. Yi Xian. Damn! Yi Xian was furious. The god-slaying sword in his hand continuously attacked, quickly killing the puppets one by one. What was the use? Was translation. Under the control of that Annihilation Organization disciple, every time Yi Xian killed a puppet, 2 more would appear. Not only did the number of puppets around him not decrease, but it increased. This could not go on. Yi Xian kept thinking of a countermeasure, but it seemed that no matter what method he used, it would not be easy to break through the puppet territory. It seemed that he had to use all his strength. Yi Xian waved his hand, and the 1,000 beast sword attendants and blossom god sword attendants appeared by his side. At the same time, they summoned their divine mounts and blossom god sword attendants. Kill them! Yi Xian ordered. Very quickly, the divine mounts and blossom god sword attendants attacked without any regard for the consequences. The battle between the puppets and the divine mounts was on the verge of breaking out. Yi Xian did not hesitate to charge at the Annihilation Organization disciple. Kid, I didn't expect you to have a backup plan. But so what? In front of me, all your tricks are useless. Die obediently. That person was not the least bit intimidated by Yi Xian's charge. Instead, he said disdainfully. In his eyes, Yi Xian's attacks were futile. Because no matter how Yi Xian attacked, he could summon his puppets in an instant to break through. Yi Xian attacked continuously, but each time, his attacks were broken by the puppets summoned by that person. It could be said that as long as there were puppets in the puppet space, he was practically invincible. Of course, that was just practically. 6-syllable mantra. Compound. Suddenly, Yi Xian used a mystique that he had not used before. 6-syllable mantra. Compound word formula. Ever since Yi Xian had obtained the 6-syllable mantra, he had frequently used the life, death, injury, and incomplete word formula. But this was the first time he had used the compound word formula. The 6-syllable mantra. Compound word formula directly copied a target. Its strength was equivalent to Yi Xian's realm. It could be said that this compound word formula had very serious limitations. If Yi Xian faced an opponent with a lower cultivation level, he would not need to use it at all. But against an opponent with a higher cultivation level, even if he summoned it, it would not be very useful. That was why Yi Xian did not use it much. But this did not mean that the compound word formula was useless. In fact, in this battle, for example, using the compound word formula was very suitable. Because the copied mirror image would have a specific mystique. In an instant, following Yi Xian's command, a ray of light formed beside Yi Xian. This ray of light condensed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was the disciple of the Annihilation Organization. That person looked at Yi Xian's actions in shock. At the same time, he looked at the mirror image in shock and could not help but ask, "What mystique is this? How can you copy me?" Yi Xian's lips curled slightly, but he did not care about that person's question. He just looked at that person coldly. "No, it can't be a real copy. It's impossible to have such a mystique. Haha, you just made a puppet that looks like me. Why do you think that will scare me? Kid, you think too much." That person laughed arrogantly. In his mind, his mystique could not be copied, and Yi Xian's actions were futile. But was that really the case? When that person saw that the mirror image had been copied, he waved his hand and 10 puppets appeared beside the mirror image. It seemed like he wanted to destroy the mirror image directly. But what happened next made him unable to remain calm. That was because the mirror image also waved its hand and summoned 10 puppets to fight against the puppets of the exterminating organization disciple. This is impossible. This is impossible. These puppets were carefully refined by me. These puppets have been imprinted with divine lattice imprints, so they will only listen to me. Impossible, impossible, how can you summon them? That person was terrified, because the mirror image that Yi Xian had summoned was actually able to summon his puppet at will. This was simply unprecedented. Ding. System notification. A special law that can be engulfed has been detected. Puppet law is recommended that the host kill the target and forcibly engulf it. Chapter 23-29. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Although the body of eternity could devour the power of other laws, Yi Xian had only encountered a few enemies with the power of laws. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, he had never encountered an enemy that could devour the power of laws. At most, they would drop fragments of laws. Why was he able to devour the power of laws this time? Could it be? Yi Xian looked at the mirror image that he had summoned using the 6 syllables mantra. His heart was filled with doubt. This was because Yi Xian could only think of this mirror image that could devour the power of laws this time. System, what are the conditions for forcibly devouring the power of laws? Ding. System notification. Insufficient data. Temporarily unknown. Ding. System notification. Known condition for forcibly devouring the power of laws. When the host uses the 6 syllables mantra to create a mirror image that completely replicates the target's power of laws and kills the target, the host can obtain the power of laws by devouring the mirror image. Ding. System notification. The 6 syllables mantra has a chance of summoning a mirror image that completely replicates the target's power of laws. So that's how it is. Yi Xian immediately understood. In other words, The 6 syllables mantra had a chance of summoning a mirror image that had the exact same power as the enemy. If such a mirror image appeared, Yi Xian just had to kill the enemy before the mirror image was destroyed. That meant that the mirror image had inherited the enemy's power of laws. Then, Yi Xian would be able to obtain the enemy's power of laws by devouring the mirror image. This setting perfectly escaped the natural law of conservation, allowing Yi Xian to use the mirror image to achieve his goal of devouring the power of laws. Yi Xian could only say that. Awesome, this was simply too awesome. As long as he found a way to devour the power of laws, then everything would be fine. In an instant, Yi Xian wore a smile on his face, but his eyes were fixed on the Annihilation Organization disciple. This person must be killed. No matter what the puppet law was, as long as it was the power of laws, Yi Xian would not despise it. Kill him. Suddenly, Yi Xian's figure accelerated again. The god-slaying sword in his hand was thrown out, allowing Wei Zhontian to control it as he looked for a suitable opportunity to attack. Spiritual Sense Control. System, give me the success rate of the treasure exchange. I want to use my spiritual sense to disrupt that guy's attack rhythm. Withered bone sword servants, totem beasts, come out. Even if you are useless now, stop the attacks of those puppets. Flower goddess, use your long-range attacks and cover him from all sides. In an instant, Yi Xian used all the means at his disposal and launched a barrage of attacks. Yi Xian had many special abilities, but due to various restrictions, he could not use all of them at once. However, the strength that Yi Xian had just displayed was more than enough. The withered bone sword attendants and all of the totemic beasts charged forward. Of course, there was also Wei Zhontian's god-slaying sword, as well as the 100-flower goddess. In the blink of an eye, all the attacks arrived at the same time. The disciple of the extermination organization had never expected that he would be instantly killed by someone whose cultivation level was lower than his. Boom! With one punch, Yi Xian used his fist to destroy the person's divine spark. He couldn't be more dead. Forceful devouring. Let me see what use the puppet nomological laws have. After Yi Xian took the person's yin and yang ring, he did not hesitate and immediately activated his forceful devouring. A mysterious force surrounded the mirror image and disintegrated it continuously. After a while, only a speck of light was left. That speck of light rushed into Yi Xian's forehead. In an instant, Yi Xian mastered the puppet nomological laws. The puppet nomological laws could only be considered an unorthodox nomological law. Its purpose was to refine and control puppets. However, once the puppet nomological laws reached a certain level, they would have a similar ability to spiritual sense control. That was to control the target. However, the puppet nomological laws were even more domineering. They could directly erase the target's spiritual sense and control them completely. Of course, to Yi Xian, regardless of whether the puppet nomological laws were good or bad, it was still the first nomological power that he had devoured. Therefore, it was still worth celebrating. Ding! System notification. Host has successfully devoured the first nomological power. Special title, Devourer of Laws. Ding! System notification. Special title, Devourer of Laws, will increase the success rate of the Devourer of Laws. Ding! System notification. Host has successfully devoured the first nomological power. System will randomly give a reward. Ding! Reward drawing in progress. Congratulations to host. You have obtained a special treasure map. Special treasure map. Ruins of the ancient 9 Netherworld Emperor's Palace. There were a total of 5 treasure maps. Once all 5 treasure maps are collected, the host will be qualified to enter the ancient 9 Netherworld Emperor's Palace. Ding! The ancient 9 Netherworld Emperor's Palace is extremely dangerous. System recommends host to begin collecting it after reaching the Godly King realm. Ding! Special mission. Treasure map of the ancient 9 Netherworld Emperor's Palace. Mission objective. Annihilate the Li family. Upon completion of the mission, host will receive a treasure map. Annihilate the Li family. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. This mission was too much. It was the Li family, an ancient family of the Kunlun divine domain. How could it be annihilated just like that? No wonder the system recommended Yi Xian to collect it after reaching the Godly King realm. Even if he was at the Godly King realm, it would be extremely difficult. But at least Yi Xian now had a target. Out of the 5 treasure maps, the clue to the second one had appeared. Without the obstruction of the disciple from the extermination organization, Xian was basically able to break through this puppet domain without the slightest bit of suspense. After a while, Xian walked out of the puppet territory. However, just as Xian was entangled with the disciples guarding the Annihilation Treasure Pavilion had already gathered. The moment Xian walked out of the puppet territory, he was immediately surrounded and attacked. Kill this man," one of the Annihilation Elders said in a low voice. At this time, there were only 30 Annihilation disciples guarding the Treasure Pavilion. Moreover, other than him who was a first-grade Divine Lord, the others were only at the True God realm. After all, this was just one of the Annihilation sect's strongholds. Where could they find so many Divine Lords? Xian looked at the charging Annihilation disciples with disdain. He raised his hand lightly and said, "Die!" There was no sound, no warning. Those disciples didn't even make the slightest sound before they all fell to the ground, their godheads already shattered. "Who are you? Why did you attack us?" The elder held a treasure in his hand, his eyes filled with anger. "Why should I kill you? Haha, this is a joke. Annihilation sect is a group that everyone has the right to kill. Tell me, why should I kill you?" Chapter 23:30. Who are you? How do you know that I'm from Annihilation? The elder was horrified. In fact, compared to his disciples being killed and his stronghold being besieged, Xian knowing that they were from Annihilation was more frightening. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Annihilation was a taboo in the realm of the gods after all. Even if any faction was suspected to be from Annihilation, they would be besieged in an instant. Annihilation was a taboo. Who I am is not important. You only need to know that I will be the one to annihilate your annihilation. Xian said calmly. Ha 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 ha, you think you can go against Annihilation? Kid, you really dare to say anything. Don't worry, from today onwards, you will be Annihilation's mortal enemy. Suddenly, the elder laughed maniacally. At the same time, waves of black gas were emitted from his body. As soon as the black gas appeared, it immediately disappeared into the void. Not good. Xian was shocked. Although he did not know what method the elder used, he knew that he was sending a message. Die for me. Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword, directly shattering the elder's godhead. However, the elder did not show any intention of dodging or defending. He was even laughing. Kid, it's too late. Those who know of Annihilation's existence must die. From today onwards, you will be subjected to Annihilation's wrath. Enjoy it slowly, haha. The elder's voice stopped abruptly. Xian frowned. It seemed that he had made a mistake this time. He did not expect Annihilation's people to have such means. Of course, Xian did not care at all. After all, Annihilation was an existence that he had to annihilate. They were his absolute enemies. What was there to worry about? Wrath. Let's see if they have the ability to do so. Xian did not care about this person. At this time, the treasure hall did not have any defensive power, so Xian did not hesitate to rush in. All the treasures that the Annihilation organization had plundered were stored here. Every 10,000 years, they would use special means to transport a portion of the resources to the headquarters. After all, they had accumulated quite a lot of treasures during this period of time. However, there wasn't much that was useful. Of course, Xian wouldn't mind either. It was unknown if it was because of that person's warning, but in short, Xian didn't receive any resistance as he charged forward. Moreover, even the members of the extermination organization who were engaged in a bloody battle outside quickly retreated. They were planning to completely abandon this base. To be more precise, those who retreated were the real members of Annihilation, while the peripheral members were left behind to be buried with the base. The people of the Blood Cloud clan finally got their wish as they successfully entered the secret realm. However, what shocked them was that the mystic realm that they had finally broken through after risking their lives was not an ancient mystic realm at all. Let alone an ancient mystic realm, there weren't many treasures in it. What Xian had left for them was only the demon god's palace. Even the people in the blood sacrifice hall had been rescued by Xian. The Blood Cloud clan had suffered heavy losses this time, but had gained nothing. How could they not be angry? It was a pity that they would never know what exactly had happened. At this time, Xian was leading these people in the direction of Linfeng City. Linfeng City was in ruins because of the Annihilation Organization. Although Mi Yu had paid a little attention to this place because of Yi Xian, one could only rely on oneself to nurture talents. At this time, seeing Yi Xian bringing back all the people who had been abducted, the entire Linfeng City was in an uproar. It must be known that this time, Yi Xian had rescued no less than 1 million people. Who knew what kind of blood sacrifice the Annihilation Organization had for them to capture so many people? There were high and low cultivation bases among these people, but the highest was only at the lower True God stage. Those with higher cultivation bases had already been turned into puppets by the Annihilation Organization, or dealt with in other ways. Of course, many totemic divine beasts had also been brought back. Totemic beasts were not of much use to the current Yi Xian. After all, he rarely used them. Therefore, it was better to leave them to the Linfeng City to be tamed. When needed, Yi Xian could come and retrieve them. In the entire Linfeng City, the highest cultivation base was now only that fellow at the 6th grade True God stage. It was rather pitiful. At this time, the Linfeng City had long since submitted to Yi Xian. Therefore, Yi Xian naturally could not leave them alone. He left a large amount of ordinary resources that were useless to him to the Linfeng City, and then stayed for a few more days before leaving. At this time, in Yi Xian's heart, the Linfeng City was perhaps just a place where he could gain faith points. Of course, Yi Xian was not too concerned about what would happen in the future. The matter of the Linfeng City was resolved perfectly, which was good news for Yi Xian. Unfortunately, he did not even have time to rest for a few days before Mi Yu and Kuan Buyu came looking for him. "Why are you two here? What's the matter?" "I say, Yi Xian, I can't see you all day long. I don't know what you're busy with, but I'm afraid you're in trouble this time," Kuan Buyu said very casually to Yi Xian. "Trouble? What trouble?" Yi Xian was stunned. "It's the Li family. Although my sister has already warned them, the Li family is still very powerful. Even my sister can't do anything about it. They may be wary of your strength, but they won't let you go. I'm afraid you won't be able to be so carefree for a while." "Your Highness, you mean the Li family is looking for trouble with me?" "Yes, but it won't be the Li family directly. It will be their subordinate forces. Naturally, there are many Li family members in the Kunlun realm. I've received news that they are preparing to make a move on you. Soon, someone will challenge you. They want to use the challenge to kill you." Yi Xian smiled. Although he did not know who came up with this brainless idea, Yi Xian could only say that only a pig could think of such a method. "Okay, I understand. That's it." Kuan Buyu stood up and looked at Yi Xian in surprise. "What else can I do? Can I not let those people not challenge me? The Kunlun list and Kun list challenges are public challenges in the Kunlun realm. Can I refuse?" "Why can't you refuse? This time, the Li family is making a move. I'm afraid the judges have already been bribed. If you accept the challenge, I'm afraid you won't even know how you died." Kuan Buyu seemed a little agitated. It was unknown whether she was worried for Yi Xian or angry at the Li family's actions. But no matter what, Kuan Buyu had good intentions. Yi Xian smiled and said to Kuan Buyu, "The Li family wants to scheme against me? Then why should I scheme against them? Starting tomorrow, I will challenge the Kun list again." Chapter 23:31. However, Yi Xian's plan was feasible. The Kunlun realm was not the Li family's Kunlun realm. Even if he could bribe 1 or 2 elders, could he bribe all of the Kunlun realm's elders? If Yi Xian took the initiative to challenge them, all of the Li family's arrangements would be ruined. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Of course, the prerequisite was that Yi Xian had the strength to challenge them. "Did you have a breakthrough?" Kuan Buyu asked Yi Xian. "Yes, I just broke through to 2nd rank Divine Lord." Yi Xian nodded. Kuan Buyu blinked. He suddenly realized that asking Yi Xian about his cultivation level was just asking for humiliation. This guy's cultivation speed was unimaginably fast. After Kuan Buyu and Mi Yu left, Yi Xian went to sign up. The Li family may be arrogant now, but one day, Yi Xian will uproot them. Yi Xian was going to challenge them again. The news spread like wildfire. No one dared to underestimate Yi Xian now. Many people still remembered how Yi Xian defeated several opponents in a row last time. Who would have thought that not long after, Yi Xian would actually start another challenge? He wondered who was the unlucky one this time. However, when the final news was announced, everyone couldn't help but be shocked. This was because this time, Xian had actually jumped 1,000 ranks and directly challenged Li Mo. Li Mo was the 13th young master of the Li family. Whether it was his status or cultivation, he was definitely not to be underestimated. The only reason he had been hovering around the top 9,000 was that he was going to challenge the first place on the Luan rankings. Although no one knew if he was that strong, one thing was for sure. This guy was hiding his strength. At the very least, he would have no problem entering the top 100 of the Luan rankings. What right did Xian have? He was just a newcomer. How long had he been in the Kunlun realm? How could he challenge Li Mo in one go? It had been many years since someone had challenged Li Mo. Was it 100 years? Or 1,000 years? No one knew what Li Mo's current cultivation was, or how strong he was. However, someone wanted to challenge Li Mo today. If it was any other ordinary person, it wouldn't matter. But the key was that the person who challenged Li Mo this time wasn't ordinary. He was Xian. He was Xian, who was in the limelight among the Kunlun newcomers. There were even some people who came to the spectator seats 2 days before the start of the competition because they were afraid that there would be no seats left if they were late. On the day of the competition, a total of 150,000 people were squeezed into the spectator seats that could only hold 100,000 people. This time, no one dared to place a bet because no one could guarantee anything for Xian. Xian was someone who could create miracles. On this day, countless people gathered around the arena space. Everyone was guessing who would win this battle. Li Mo arrived at the arena early in the morning. How could he not know about the enmity between the Li family and Xian? In fact, Li Mo not only knew the young master of the Li family that Xian had killed, but he also had a good relationship with him. Therefore this time, Li Mo had already made up his mind to teach Xian an unforgettable lesson. However, while Li Mo arrived early, Xian didn't come at all. As the start of the competition approached, some people began to suspect that Xian was too timid to come. Speaking of which, although Xian is considered powerful, he is still a newcomer. The last time he challenged the Luan role, he was only at the True God realm. Young Master Li Mo is a Divine Lord realm expert. Could it be that Xian doesn't dare to come? It shouldn't be possible. The last time Xian challenged, he defeated several challengers in a row. He doesn't seem like a timid person. That day, his words about who else is still fresh in many people's minds. Not necessarily. Perhaps Xian knows that his opponent this time is at the Divine Lord realm, so he's afraid. There was a flurry of discussion. There were countless guesses as to why Xian had not arrived. But in fact, Xian was just too lazy to waste time before the competition began. Look, he's here. In an instant, everyone's eyes focused on one person. Who else could this person be but Xian? They saw Xian stroll into the arena space. He actually did not put his opponent in his eyes at all. That's not right. Look at his cultivation. He has already broken through to the Divine Lord realm. How is this possible? How long has it been? He grasped the power of laws? How is this possible? However, a Divine Lord realm was a Divine Lord realm. This could not be faked. The moment Xian walked in, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. With his Divine Lord realm cultivation, he shocked the entire audience. Perhaps the Divine Lord realm was nothing. In the Kunlun realm, there were many people whose cultivation surpassed or was equal to the Divine Lord realm. However, the key was Xian's cultivation speed. How long had it been? He actually advanced to the Divine Lord realm. It can't be, right? This Xian actually advanced to the Divine Lord realm. One has to know that the Divine Lord realm is a major barrier. Who knows how many people are stuck at the peak of the True God realm, unable to advance at all. Furthermore, the Divine Lord realm requires one to grasp the power of laws. Combat strength is increased several times. Yeah, the power of laws. He actually grasped the power of laws. How is this possible? There are only 6 places in the Kunlun realm to comprehend laws. Each law's power, unless one obtains a special lucky chance or an elder's inheritance. Otherwise, wanting to obtain the power of laws is incomparably difficult. Why can Xian obtain it? The people discussed animatedly. Many people found it hard to accept that Xian advanced to the Divine Lord realm so quickly. To them, this was simply unbelievable. The Divine Lord Realm was also known as the Master Divine Lord Realm. This meant that Yi Xian was already a master god. However, this was the truth. Yi Xian walked forward step by step, leaving behind countless discussions behind him. Finally, Yi Xian stood in the arena space. "Kid, you're Yi Xian?" Liemo looked at Yi Xian indifferently. Although he was surprised by Yi Xian's advancement speed, he would not be intimidated by this. After all, he was an experienced Divine Lord Realm cultivator, while Yi Xian had just advanced. He did not believe that Yi Xian's grasp of laws could compare to his. Yi Xian looked at Liemo and the corners of his mouth suddenly curled up. "You're the Li clan's dog?" Boom. In an instant, everyone was shocked. The entire arena was silent. Yi Xian actually insulted a member of the Li clan. Was he openly declaring war on the Li clan? Perhaps the average person did not know about the Divine Lord Palace, but how could the people of the large factions not know about the Divine Lord Palace? They all knew that Yi Xian had killed a young master of the Li clan, and even made the Li clan pay a huge price. The Li clan would never let Yi Xian go. Logically speaking, Yi Xian should have avoided the Li clan. No one expected that he would openly insult a young master of the Li clan in the arena space. Chapter 2332. Many people wanted to ask what Yi Xian was trying to do. In fact, Yi Xian was already being targeted by annihilation. It would be unwise for him to offend the Li family. However, Yi Xian was Yi Xian. He knew very well what he wanted and why he was doing this. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. He wasn't being impulsive. Since Yi Xian knew that some things couldn't be avoided, why should he avoid them? Whatever the Li family wanted to do, Yi Xian would take them on. Li Mo's expression twisted when he heard Yi Xian's words. Yi Xian was too arrogant. He didn't care about the Li family at all. "Brat, you're very good. Today, I'll teach you how to behave properly." Liemo looked at Yi Xian and squeezed these words out of his teeth. Deicide/. However, no one expected Yi Xian's reply to be a storm-like attack. Boom. Although Liemo had already put up a defense, he was still sent flying by the unexpected attack. "How dare you ambush me?" Liemo stared at Yi Xian. He never expected Yi Xian to ambush him. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had no intention of paying attention to him. After knocking Liemo back, Yi Xian waved his hand and summoned the 1,000 Beast Sword Servants and Petal God Sword Servants. Wei Zhentian also controlled the God-slaying sword to charge forward. As for Yi Xian himself, he summoned countless resources and began to refine restrictions and formations on the spot. Damn it! Liemo naturally knew that Yi Xian was a Restriction Grandmaster and a Divine Talisman Grandmaster. However, that was only a rumor. Liemo hadn't seen it with his own eyes, so he didn't take it seriously. Moreover, Yi Xian had suddenly challenged him, so he didn't have time to prepare. Therefore, when Liemo saw that Yi Xian was actually refining a restriction on the spot, his eyes were filled with panic. "No, I can't let him refine a powerful restriction." "Humph, you've only just started refining, but I've already prepared a restriction." Liemo suddenly waved his hand and a ray of light appeared. Then a giant appeared. This was one of the many treasures that the Li family had given Liemo, the giant restriction. Yes, it was a restriction, not a divine talisman. The principle of the giant restriction was to use the restriction's power to condense a phantom of a giant, and then use the restriction to continuously absorb the surrounding god power, continuously supplying god power to the giant, giving the giant an indestructible strength. Yi Xian, of course, saw this scene. Giant restriction? Then, I'll play with you with the giant divine talisman. Yes, Yi Xian had chosen the divine talisman. Restrictions could create a giant mirror image, but so could the divine talisman. Yi Xian waved his hand casually, and the half-refined restriction was quickly dispelled by him. One had to know that refining a restriction was a delicate job, and refining one was already very difficult. Furthermore, to break down a half-refined restriction into a material was unheard of. What's going on? How did Yi Xian do it? How can he turn a half-refined restriction into a material? No, this is impossible. No one can do it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. A fellow who was also a restriction master looked at Yi Xian's actions in shock as he continuously muttered to himself. Beside him, his good friend, who was also a restriction master, was also incomparably shocked. Could it be that Yi Xian has mastered a restriction technique from ancient times? According to legend, the restrictions of the ancient times could be refined according to one's will. The same restriction could even produce several different effects. However, wasn't it said that this technique had been lost in the inheritance? The experts saw the technique, while the laymen saw the excitement. Those who knew restrictions were shocked, but those who didn't started to mock Yi Xian. Haha, look, that guy is so scared that he doesn't dare to continue refining. I think this Yi Xian is just an undeserved reputation. He just didn't meet a worthy opponent before. Now that he has met young Master Li, he knows what's good for him. That's right, that's right. With his ability, he actually wants to challenge young Master Li. He's simply courting death. Of course, these people's ignorance only made those who knew the ropes look down on them. Yi Xian removed the restriction and used the resources to refine the divine talisman with a wave of his hand. This scene was simply like a miracle. At the very least, in the eyes of the restriction masters and divine talisman masters, this was a miracle. One by one, the materials disappeared into Yi Xian's hands. After a while, a divine talisman was refined. Yi Xian casually threw a giant out, and it directly fought with Li Mo's giant. You also have a giant restriction. Kid, it seems that I underestimated you. Then, this time, how are you going to defend yourself? Yi Xian, you should feel lucky. This magic treasure was given to me by my family's elders. Originally, I was going to use it when I challenged the first place on the Luan list. I didn't expect that you would let me use it early today. Enjoy it. A strange statue appeared in Li Mo's hand. Li Mo casually threw it, and the statue rushed toward Yi Xian. Moreover, it grew bigger and bigger. Heavens! It's the Li family's 9 Dragons Pagoda. Li Mo actually has such a precious treasure. 9 Dragons Pagoda. What is that? It is said that the Li family has countless treasures, but not many are famous. This 9 Dragons Pagoda is a famous treasure. There is more than one 9 Dragons Pagoda. The Li family used a special method to forge it, but even so, it is very rare. This magic treasure is extremely powerful. What's so special about him? The man asked his companion in confusion. Humph, special? The 9 Dragons Pagoda is more than special. Forging the 9 Dragons Pagoda requires 9 experts who are at least king gods and above to use the power of the laws. Then, through some mysterious method, the power of the laws is sealed in the 9 Dragons Pagoda. Once activated, the 9 Dragons Pagoda will directly suppress the target under the pagoda and use the power of the 9 laws to trap them to death. Moreover, that's not all. You should know that in the 9 Dragons Pagoda, there are countless divine beasts guarding it. This magic treasure is a mystic realm level magic treasure because it is an independent mystic realm. A mystic realm level magic treasure. Countless people gasped. This kind of magic treasure was something that only existed in legends. In everyone's mind, a mystic realm was fixed in one place, like an immovable mountain. However, a mystic realm magic treasure was different. This was a mobile mystic realm. This kind of thing only existed in legends. Who would have thought that the Li family's 9 Dragons Pagoda was a mystic realm magic treasure? Of course, the 9 Dragons Pagoda is not a complete mystic realm magic treasure. It can only be considered a semi-mystic realm magic treasure because it is not a true mystic realm, but a special space created by the power of the laws. Chapter 23:33. The crowd heaved a sigh of relief after that person finished speaking. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. After all, how could a treasure from a secret realm appear so easily? Yi Xian didn't know about this. Of course, even if Yi Xian knew, he probably wouldn't care. At this time, Yi Xian was looking at the 9 Dragons Pagoda and was slightly surprised because the system actually gave him a notification. Ding! System notification. Host can forcibly devour an item. By devouring this item, host can obtain a law fragment. Yi Xian was obviously surprised because Li Mo actually gave him something. What was this? Forcibly devour. Yi Xian raised his hand and a powerful suction force appeared. The 9 Dragons Pagoda, which was constantly expanding, suddenly shrank and was devoured by Yi Xian. Silence. Everyone was silent. Even Li Mo was dumbfounded as he looked at Yi Xian. He kept the 9 Dragons Pagoda? The crowd didn't know that Yi Xian had devoured the 9 Dragons Pagoda, so they thought that Yi Xian had directly kept the Nine Dragons Pagoda. How is this possible? Although the Nine Dragons Pagoda is an ownerless item because it needs to be refined with everyone's strength, it contains the power of 9 different laws. Unless there is a special method to control it, no one can take it away unless they have the power of all 9 laws. You're saying that Yi Xian has the power of 9 laws? Impossible, I don't believe it. Even the #1 genius on the Kunlun Realm's Kunlun list only has 8 laws. How can Yi Xian have 9? Yes, it must be a coincidence. Maybe Yi Xian has a special item that can suppress the 9 Dragons Pagoda. A newbie with 9 laws. I don't believe it. Yi Xian didn't care if they believed it or not. He was still immersed in the system's notification. Ding. System notification. Host has devoured the 9 Dragons Pagoda. Obtained Law of Time Fragment, Law of Puppetry Fragment, Law of Prosperity Fragment. Yi Xian had obtained 9 fragments in one go. Although Yi Xian didn't know what use some of the fragments had, for example, the Law of Prosperity. Yi Xian didn't understand what that law was. Give me back my 9 Dragons Pagoda. The 9 Dragons Pagoda was a great treasure of the Li family, and it was absolutely not allowed to be leaked. Now, Yi Xian had actually slimmed down Li Mo's 9 dragons. How could he not be terrified? But Yi Xian didn't, he didn't want Yi Xian. Damn it Yi Xian, I'm going to kill you. You force me to do this. Today, I will let you know what fear is. Secret Technique Divine Ability. Heavenly Seal. Secret. The spectators didn't know how to react. They didn't expect the young master of the Li family to have a secret technique. Secret techniques were much stronger than ordinary mystiques. They were even more powerful than law mystiques. Not only were secret techniques rare, they could produce unimaginable results according to their nature. In an instant, a light screen appeared with the young master of the Li family at the center. The Heavenly Seal. It was a mystique that isolated all divine power. One had to know that the most basic requirement to use all treasures and mystiques was divine power. Once all divine power was isolated, it meant that the person inside couldn't use any mystique at all. Terrifying. They hadn't thought that Li Mo would have such a divine ability. At that moment, even the judge could only watch. Moreover, no matter who it was, as long as they entered that place, their godly strength would be cut off. Even the strongest cultivators could only rely on their own bodies to study. Yi Xian slightly frowned, because at this moment, he also felt that his divine power had been directly blocked. The 1,000 beast sword servants, divine mounts, and so on disappeared. Fortunately, Wei Zhentian was still there, but he didn't dare to control the god-slaying sword to attack. He returned to Yi Xian's hand. The 2 giants who were fighting immediately disappeared as well, because they were also relying on their divine power to fight. Damn you, I'll kill you. I'll definitely kill you. Chapter 2334. However, the crux of the matter was that there was no way to convict Yi Xian. This was because in the arena, one was only required not to kill, but not to cripple one's cultivation. Under normal circumstances, unless one used a special ability, it would be impossible for one to cripple one's cultivation after losing a battle to be so simple. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. If Li Mo had not opened the Heavenly Seal and isolated his divine power, Yi Xian would not have been able to cripple him so easily. It could be said that he had brought this upon himself. He would not even be pitied by others. Yi Xian had actually taken the initiative to cripple a young master of the Li clan. At this time, it was impossible for the Li clan not to be angry. They were still planning how to kill Yi Xian, but Yi Xian had made the first move. Of course, they did not believe that Yi Xian could continue to hide. As long as he stopped the challenges, they could use the tactic of taking turns to wear Yi Xian down. At the very least, they could prevent him from cultivating. However, the Li clan's plan failed in the end. What they did not expect was that Yi Xian issued a new challenge the next day. This time, it was a core disciple of the Li clan on the Luan roll. It could be said that Yi Xian could easily defeat Li Mo, so there was no doubt that he could defeat this person. Challenging this person was simply a waste of time. If it were anyone else, they would probably choose the most suitable opponent based on their own strength. This was the basic rule of the arena challenge. However, Yi Xian did not do this. He challenged people one by one. As long as they were related to the Li clan, he would challenge them one by one. Moreover, he would not show mercy. Even if he did not kill his opponent, he would definitely severely injure his opponent. In just a few months, Yi Xian had severely injured more than 30 core disciples of the Li clan's affiliated families. Who could not see such an obvious provocation? It could be said that Yi Xian and the Li clan had reached an irreconcilable point. On this day, Yi Xian issued another challenge. This time, he challenged the person ranked 29th on the Luan roll. Without a doubt, this person was also a disciple of the Li clan's affiliated faction. Moreover, this person knew that he had no chance of defeating Yi Xian. He had two choices in front of him. Either he would be severely injured by Yi Xian, or he would voluntarily surrender. However, taking the initiative to admit defeat was a very despicable act in the Kuan-Luan realm. Once you did so, not to mention other things, you would be looked down upon in the future. More importantly, you would forever lose the right to challenge the Kuan list and Luan list. Yi Xian was forcing that person to make a difficult choice. Big brother, we can't allow Yi Xian to continue being so arrogant. Give the order, we'll just kill that brat. Was the seventh young Yi Xian was the Li clan's seventh young master of the Luan clan. He was ranked 172nd on the Luan roll. His strength was unfathomable. He was also the one in charge of the operation against Yi Xian. Attack? How? This brat has been hiding in the Kuan-Luan realm. Do you think we can kill him in the Kuan-Luan realm? Big brother, who said that this brat won't go out? I heard that he has a maid outside. Although she is a maid in name, I don't think she is that simple. This maid has 10 divine talisman masters by her side. Humph. 10 divine talisman masters and a girl that the brat cares about. Don't tell me that we can't lure him out? You mean we should use those people as bait? No, I know those people. They are from the divine talisman race. The divine talisman race has always been protective. If we do that, we will offend the entire divine talisman race. We can't do that. Who said that we have to attack those divine talisman masters? We just need to send a message and then set up a trap. I don't believe that Yi Xian won't take the bait. Is that so? Okay, then go and arrange it. Yi Xian still didn't know that a conspiracy was being planned against him. He had to admit that these people had guessed correctly. They knew that Yi Xian was very protective of his own people. However, they were also courting death. On this day, after Yi Xian defeated his opponent, he was preparing to choose his next opponent. However, a voice transmission talisman arrived in front of Yi Xian. It could be said that almost no one would use a voice transmission talisman to contact Yi Xian. Therefore, Yi Xian was quite surprised. However, when Yi Xian opened the voice transmission talisman, he was immediately furious. Because the content of the voice transmission talisman said that Fian and the rest were now under control. If Yi Xian didn't want them to die, then he should go to the Desolate Mountain immediately. The Desolate Mountain was a very dangerous place because it was full of all kinds of evil divine beasts. Moreover, there were all kinds of dangers. There were no treasures or resources that were worth paying attention to in there. Therefore, very few people would go there. After Yi Xian received the news, he did not stop for a moment and directly rushed towards the Desolate Mountain. At this time, outside the Desolate Mountain, more than a dozen powerhouses were lying in ambush. However, of course, there were no people from the family. However, the strength of these people was incomparably powerful. The weakest one had actually reached the Divine Lord realm. There was even a high-level Divine Lord realm super powerhouse. This was clearly the rhythm of wanting to kill Yi Xian. However, even if Yi Xian knew that it was a trap, it was impossible not to go over. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the Desolate Mountain. You are Yi Xian? A 4th-grade mid-level Divine Lord realm guy looked at Yi Xian askance, his eyes full of disdain. Of course, he had the qualifications because he was a mid-level Divine Lord realm. Facing Yi Xian, he had the strength to crush him. Yes, I am Yi Xian. Where are Fian and the rest? Yi Xian looked at that person and was not afraid because of his cultivation in the slightest. Haha, brat, looks like that lass is quite important to you. Don't worry, they're fine because we didn't capture them at all. Wanting to kill you, we don't need to use any methods at all. Hearing that Fian and the rest were fine, Yi Xian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Since Yi Xian and the rest were fine, Yi Xian naturally would not stay. After all, the opponent's strength was too strong. It was not what Yi Xian could contend with at all. System, activate the wings of the god's teleportation ability. Let's leave this place. Ding. System notification. Host, please take note. This place has a special restriction. Host cannot use any form of teleportation here. What? Yi Xian was alarmed. He actually could not teleport away? Looks like it was troublesome again this time. Sure enough, at this time, he heard that mid-level Divine Lord Realm guy say, "Brat, we're just following orders. You can go on your way in peace. Kill for me, kill him." In an instant, two low-level Divine Lord Realm guys rushed toward Yi Xian. Chapter 23:35. How could Yi Xian not understand this logic? At this moment, those people had actually underestimated Yi Xian and had only sent two people. This was undoubtedly Yi Xian's only chance. It could even be said that this was his only chance. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD, Thousand Beast Sword Attendant, Flower God Sword Attendant, attack. Yi Xian casually summoned his Thousand Beast Sword Attendant and Sword Incarnation Sword Attendant and pounced towards the enemy. However, Yi Xian himself turned around and fled. Block, catch him. Don't let him escape. Yi Xian actually fled as soon as he said so. For a moment, those people had no time to react and could only chase after him. Yi Xian didn't care so much at this moment. He immediately activated his full speed and fled continuously. Although Yi Xian's speed was still very fast, the enemy's cultivation base was still higher than Yi Xian's. Therefore, at this moment, Yi Xian was unable to truly escape the pursuit of these people. What do I do? Yi Xian was greatly alarmed. Once these people didn't catch up, the outcome was obvious. Yi Xian quickly thought of a solution in his mind. However, he could only reject them one by one. As the chase continued, an extremely fast person was getting closer and closer to Yi Xian. The situation was naturally very dangerous. Once Yi Xian was stopped by this person, he would face the encirclement of more than 10 super experts. When that time came, he wouldn't have a chance to escape. What do I do? What can I do to escape this predicament? Yi Xian thought to himself as he fled. Suddenly, he thought of the Overgod battlefield. Because Yi Xian was going to participate in the challenge of the Overgod battlefield, Mi Yan had given Yi Xian a teleportation talisman. The teleportation talisman would send him to the Overgod battlefield. In other words, Yi Xian had to go to the Overgod battlefield to have a chance of escaping this calamity. However, the dangers in the battlefield of the Overgods could be said to be extremely terrifying. Even though the battlefield of the Overgods had not opened, it was still extremely dangerous. It could be said that this was a place with only a slim chance of survival. Furthermore, with Yi Xian's current strength, if he was unlucky, he would definitely die. What to do? Yi Xian's mind raced. Ding! Warning! Warning! The host has suffered a fatal attack. The host has suffered a fatal attack. Ding! The system automatically took over the defense. The threat has been removed. Ding! Warning! Warning! The host has suffered another fatal attack. Boom! The system had blocked the first attack for Yi Xian, but it was unable to block the second attack in time. In an instant, Yi Xian was sent flying by an extremely powerful force. Along the way, Yi Xian directly smashed through more than a dozen mountains in succession before finally coming to a stop. But the enemy also finally appeared. It was that high-grade Divine Lord fellow, and he actually personally took action. Brat, you shouldn't have offended someone you can't afford to offend. Then die. Suddenly, that person launched another attack. Yi Xian was very clear that if he was hit, he would definitely die. It seemed that he could only enter the Chief God battlefield. System, use the Chief God battlefield teleportation talisman. Ding! Teleportation activated. Teleportation successful. In an instant, Yi Xian disappeared. After Yi Xian used the teleportation talisman, he immediately fell into a coma. It was unknown how long it took for him to wake up. When Yi Xian woke up, he found himself in an incomparably miserable state. A high-grade Divine Lord. Even without the title of a high-grade Divine Lord, it was more than enough to kill a low-grade Divine Lord like Yi Xian. Now, Yi Xian was able to escape with his life, which was already pretty good. Damn Li Li! Yi Xian cursed. Even if he didn't say it, He knew who attacked him. System. Use instant recovery. Yi Xian directly ordered. Instant recovery could allow Yi Xian to recover from all his injuries in an instant. However, the cooldown time was very long. Ding. Host's injuries are healed. Ding. Instant recovery's cooldown time is 76 years. Indeed, this cooldown time was really long. However, this also showed how serious Yi Xian's injuries were this time. After his injuries were healed, Yi Xian could then observe his surroundings. It had to be said that Yi Xian's luck was really good this time. Before the Chief God battlefield opened, one would be randomly teleported in after using a teleportation talisman. However, this time, Yi Xian was actually only teleported to the border area. How could this not be considered lucky? Of course, Yi Xian's most important task now was to find the exit to the Kunlun realm. After all, this was the Chief God battlefield. If Yi Xian couldn't find the right exit, he would probably be killed the moment he stepped out. The Chief God battlefield was huge. Perhaps some people would think that since this was a battlefield, there naturally wouldn't be any divine beasts or the like. However, this was an extremely wrong idea. In fact, divine beasts would appear in any Chief God battlefield. Generally speaking, people were used to calling them divine beasts of war. These divine beasts of war were different from the divine beasts of war that participated in battles. These divine beasts of war were special existences that fed on the corpses of the gods who died in battle. There were many types of divine beasts of war. Among them, the most common were the spiritual bodies formed by the souls of the powerhouses who died in battle. These spiritual bodies usually retained some battle instincts. However, they didn't have spiritual intelligence. They only had the brutal concept of slaughter in their hearts. Another type of divine beast of war was also a type of spiritual body. However, it was nurtured from the corpses of the gods who died in battle. This type of divine beast had a certain level of intelligence. At the same time, it was also extremely powerful. Of course, there were also some special people in the Chief God battlefield. For example, adventurers who came to the Chief God battlefield to seek opportunities. Or it could be said that they cultivated some strange magical powers and were special sects that couldn't be recognized by the outside world. In short, before the Chief God battlefield opened, it was also an independent existence. In fact, it was even more dangerous and terrifying. Yi Xian had come to the Chief God battlefield once before. However, that time it was many times safer. Moreover, the Chief God battlefield that he entered in the 100 territories of Mo couldn't be compared to the Chief God battlefield in the Kunlun Divine Territory. They were two completely different levels of existence. Yi Xian advanced cautiously. In order to avoid being hunted down by the Li family, he fled here. However, this place was even more terrifying than the Li family's pursuit. Stop right there. Suddenly, a voice rang out beside Yi Xian. Yes, beside him. Yi Xian's spiritual awareness was already quite good. He also had the help of the system. However, he didn't expect that someone would come so close to him without him noticing. Yi Xian stopped and turned around. Behind him were 3 men and 2 women. The treasures and clothes on these people were very messy. However, their levels were quite good. Clearly, they were picked up from the Chief God battlefield. Ding! System notification. Target specified. Lowest is mid-level warrior level true god. Highest is upper-level king level true god. There were 5 of them, and all of them had titles. Yi Xian was slightly shocked in his heart. Even though these 5 people were all at the true god realm and Yi Xian was at least at the divine lord realm, Yi Xian was asking for guidance. If it was really big, he probably wouldn't be able to gain the slightest advantage. Chapter 2336. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Bone Village? What is this place? I came from the outside. I wanted to find some treasures here. Yi Xian guessed that these people might be the ones who came here to find treasures, so he answered. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Someone from the outside? An adventurer? Humph, you're trying to trick us. A young girl stepped forward and asked Yi Xian. Even the magic treasure in her hand began to glow. No, I'm not lying to you. I really came from the outside. Humph, you're still trying to trick us. This is the 5th zone. Adventurers like you are only active in the 1st and 2nd zones. You rarely go to the 3rd zone, let alone the fifth zone. Tell us, who are you? Yi Xian did not know anything about the first, second, or third zones. I'll say it again. I came from the outside. I came to the battlefield of the overgods to find treasures here. But when I was teleported in, I came here directly. Teleported in? Directly to the fifth zone? Brother, what do you think we should do? Let's wait for the elders to decide. An older villager said. Then, Yi Xian was led forward by them. However, the further Yi Xian went, the more shocked he became. This was because what Yi Xian saw here were all titles with front crowns. Even a mere child of the deity realm actually had front crowns. Most of these people were at least in the general realm. Who were these people? Yi Xian had countless doubts in his heart. Very quickly, Yi Xian was brought to a simple village. Yes, it was a village. However, everything that was used to build this village was actually a magic treasure. Even the stone tablet erected at the entrance of the village was a rare magic treasure, just like the Buzhou mountain seal that Yi Xian used before. However, the majority of the magical treasures here were broken. Very quickly, Yi Xian was brought to a sword house that was completely built from broken swords. A few elders were gathered there. Elder, we found this suspicious person at the entrance of the village. He said he came from the outside. We couldn't confirm it, so we had to bring him here. At this time, Yi Xian was looking at the elders. However, the more he looked, the more shocked he became. One of the elders actually had an emperor-level title. Young man, what's your name? An elder asked Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not dare to hesitate and answered immediately, I'm Yi Xian. Oh, Yi Xian, you said that you came from the outside. So, how did you, as an explorer as you, enter the fifth zone? Even if your Lord God Master came himself, he wouldn't be able to translation even if your Lord God Realm Lord God even Master God. Lord God even God Lord God translation. Ye Lord God translation God translation how translation what arrogance. Even if the Divine Master came, he would not be able to find them. Yi Xian was slightly shocked, but he did not dare to hide anything. He told them about how he had been hunted down and how he had used a teleportation talisman to come here in a moment of desperation. So that's how it is. Indeed, in the past few days, the laws of the fifth region have been loosening. If you used a random teleportation talisman, you might have been able to appear in the fifth region. Fine, since you've come, it can be considered your fate. You can stay here. Elder, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. May I ask if you know where the teleportation array is? It's better for me to leave. Yi Xian naturally did not want to stay here. After all, there were many things waiting for him outside. Haha, young man, you want to leave this place? Do you know where this is? Elder, didn't you say that this is the fifth zone? Naturally, this is also the battlefield of the sovereigns. Haha, yes, this is still the battlefield of the sovereigns. However, what do you think the fifth zone is? Do you think this is a part of the sovereign space? The elder actually laughed loudly, causing Yi Xian to be puzzled. Is that not the case? Yi Xian asked, puzzled. Of course not. All right, I'll let you see what the fifth zone is. The elder waved his hand, and the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet suddenly disappeared. What appeared was a screen of light. Through the screen of light, Yi Xian could see everything clearly. This was actually the sky above the battlefield of the sovereigns. No, this was not the sky. Although Yi Xian could not explain it clearly, this was definitely not the sky above the battlefield of the sovereigns. However, the elder quickly answered Yi Xian's doubts. See, that is the battlefield of the sovereigns you speak of. The fifth zone does not exist. Does not exist. What did he mean? The battlefield of the sovereigns naturally did not exist in ancient times. It was because of the Great War of the Gods in ancient times that the current world was formed. However, during the Great War of the Gods, a portion of the super experts also created secret realms of nothingness. These secret realms have no physical form, so there is no way to enter and naturally no way to leave. These secret realms are the secret realms of nothingness. The secret realms of nothingness do exist, but they also do not exist. This is a place that is blessed by the laws. It is formed by the laws. You want to leave? Haha, do you think that is possible? Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. He asked anxiously, but I've already entered. Why can't I leave? Yi Xian had never heard of the secret realms of nothingness. Although he believed that these people would not lie to him, Yi Xian could not be trapped here forever. I've already said that you entered purely by chance. It is because the laws have loosened. However, the loosening of the laws rarely happens even once in millions of years. Moreover, every time it happens, the length of time is uncertain. We also do not know where it will appear. So, how are you going to leave? Is there really no other way? Yi Xian was extremely unwilling. He did not want to be trapped here forever, trapped in this so-called secret realms of nothingness. Of course, it is not that there is no other way. When your front title reaches the emperor level and you master more than 6 types of laws, you will receive the title of Envoy of Nothingness. At that time, you will naturally be able to leave. The emperor level front title. 6 types of laws. Perhaps 6 types of laws were nothing to Yi Xian, but it was extremely difficult to obtain the emperor level front title. But at the very least, this was an opportunity. Yi Xian frowned. This time, he was really in big trouble. System. Do you have any way to get out? Ding! System notification. The host is trapped in a special space. The system is unable to help. Alright, the system was unable to do anything. Could it be that Yi Xian could only be trapped here? Ding! System notification. The flow of time here is 1001. In other words, if the host stays here for 1000 years, only 1 year will pass in the outside world. The flow of time was different, but it was of no use to Yi Xian. Even if Yi Xian spent a few thousand years, he was not confident that he could obtain the emperor-level front title. Chapter 2337. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. For a long time, Yi Xian pondered over this problem. However, no matter how hard he tried, it was all in vain. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. It seemed that there was no other way to get out of this place other than obtaining the title of Envoy of the Void. As Yi Xian's understanding of this place deepened, he also knew that the people here were all remnants of the ancient times. It could be said that this place was an ancient mystic realm. However, it was a very small and special ancient mystic realm. Since there was no other way to get out of this place, Yi Xian could only try his best to become the Envoy of the Void. Unknowingly, Yi Xian had already stayed in this place for 1,000 years. During this period of time, he constantly comprehended the power of the laws. This place was blessed by the laws. Sometimes, the power of the laws could even be touched by a stretch of his hand. However, the power of the laws here was complete, so Yi Xian could not obtain the power of the laws through devouring. 1,000 years, an entire 1,000 years, Yi Xian had finally successfully grasped the power of 4 laws. The first law was the divine talisman law that Yi Xian mastered under the guidance of an elder. This law seemed useless, but a divine talisman master who mastered the divine talisman law could create his own divine talismans and not just rely on the divine talismans left behind by his predecessors. The second law was the law of nothingness, which was also obtained under the guidance of that elder. The law of nothingness was a law unique to the nothingness secret realm. It could be said that it existed, but it could also be said that it did not exist. It was a law that everyone who lived in the nothingness secret realm would master because it did not take long to comprehend this law. Of course, the prerequisite was that one was in the nothingness secret realm. As for the third law, it was the law of space. This law gave Yi Xian the ability to teleport without limit. Of course, it also consumed a lot of energy. The fourth law was the law of planes. This law was related to both the law of space and the law of nothingness. After Yi Xian mastered the law of space and the law of nothingness, he accidentally mastered this law. Combined with these 4 laws, Yi Xian's law of devour and law of puppetry, Yi Xian now possessed the power of 6 laws. And because of the power of these 6 laws, Yi Xian also directly obtained the title of king rank. However, there was still a long way to go before he could reach the emperor-level title. Another 1,000 years passed. During this time, Yi Xian studied restrictions, talismans, pill refinement, and forging non-stop. Finally, Yi Xian raised his title by 1 level and reached the emperor rank title. However, the final emperor rank title took Yi Xian a full 3,000 years. And in these 3,000 years, Yi Xian's only gain was the will to fight. Yes, in these 3,000 years, Yi Xian had been constantly fighting with the people here. Facing the true God realm, Yi Xian had suppressed his own cultivation to the true God realm. Furthermore, he didn't even use the god-slaying sword, nor did he use any of the sword attendants. Facing true gods, he suppressed his cultivation to the true god realm. Fighting non-stop, using his own instincts to fight, constantly honing his will to fight. Finally, after 3,000 years, Xianxia successfully advanced to the emperor rank title. 5,000 years. Although it was only 5 years in the outside world, Xianxia had truly experienced 5,000 years. Finally, he had become the envoy of nothingness. It was time to say goodbye. It was time to leave the 5th district. Other than Xianxia, no one else knew of the existence of this place. The nothingness secret territory, the mysterious secret territory. Xianxia, think carefully. Once you leave this place, even if you know that we are here, you won't be able to return. Are you sure you want to leave? The Grand Elder looked at Xianxia, his eyes filled with reluctance. After 5,000 years, Xianxia and the Grand Elder had formed a deep friendship. Grand Elder, don't worry. You said that as long as I have the venerable rank title and master some special laws, I can return. I have my reasons for leaving, but I believe that I will return here sooner or later. Alright, since you've made up your mind, you can leave. Below is the battlefield of the Masters of Gods that you speak of. You've projected down before, so I'm sure you've gained a lot. Since you're ready to leave, I'll take your projection to the mysterious place in the 1st district. Treat it as a parting gift for you. Projecting down was a special saying in the Void Realm. After grasping the laws of nothingness, those in the Void Realm could use their projection to descend to the battlefield of the Masters of Gods. It could be said that the damaged artifacts in the village had been collected from the battlefield when they were bored. Of course, as they could not leave, they could only throw these things away. This was also why the 3 men and 2 women knew about the adventurers when Xianxia first arrived. In reality, those in the Void Realm had always been using their invisible eyes to observe everything that happened on the battlefield of the Masters of Gods. Very soon, the Grand Elder brought Xianxia to a mysterious place through projection. The surroundings were sealed by chaotic laws, so without the Grand Elder's guidance, Xianxia probably would not have discovered this place. Xianxia, let's go. What we can discover and what we can obtain will all depend on your own luck. The power of the laws here is extremely chaotic. Once your mirror image is broken, you can only return empty-handed. Xianxia nodded. Without hesitation, he entered directly. Perhaps others would need to spend a lot of time or choose, but Xianxia did not need to. He did not care what was inside. He could just absorb it all into his devouring space. Others were afraid of the chaotic laws and did not dare to absorb them casually, but Xianxia was not afraid. At most, he could just create a place in his devouring space for the chaotic laws to stay. As such, Xianxia left quickly and returned quickly as well. The Grand Elder did not ask any questions. Instead, he watched as Xianxia made his way to the edge of the Void Secret Realm. After becoming an envoy of nothingness, the greatest difference was that a light screen would form around one's body. As long as the light screen reached the edge of the Void Secret Realm, it would become the best concealment method. Yes, the protective laws of the Void Realm would not attack. When Xianxia stepped out, he had already appeared in the air above the true battlefield of the Masters of Gods. Xianxia raised his head. There was nothing but nothingness. No matter what methods he used, he couldn't find anything here. However, Xianxia knew that above him, there was a group of people who had lived with him for 5,000 years. They were watching him silently. Moreover, his raised head might remain there for a long time. After all, the difference in the flow of time was huge. Xianxia turned around. Without hesitation, he flew off into the distance. Within the Void Secret Realm, Xianxia had already found the exit. Chapter 2338. As for the Master God battlefield, Xianxia did not say that there was anything worth remembering. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. The only thing that made Xianxia remember was the people in the Void Secret Realm. He did not know how many more Void Secret Realms there were in the God Realm, but Xianxia knew that there was a Void Secret Realm in the Kunlun God Domain, a Void Secret Realm that he had lived in for 5,000 years. Xianxia had disappeared for 5 years, and many people were saying that Xianxia might have died. After all, he had offended the Li family, so how could the Li family let him go? In the God Realm, 5 years was not a long time. After all, some gods could cultivate in seclusion for millions of years. However, Yi Xian had suddenly stopped in the middle of his continuous challenges, and then went silent. It was inevitable that people would suspect that he had been killed by the Li family. Of course, to most people, Yi Xian's life and death was not something they cared about. Therefore, Yi Xian's disappearance would not change the slightest bit in the Kunlun God domain. The previous experience made Yi Xian understand that he was no match for the Li family, but at the same time, Yi Xian knew that the Li family and he would not rest until one of them was dead. This time, Yi Xian did not return to the Kunlun God domain immediately. Instead, he found Fian and the Divine Talisman race and asked them to return to the Divine Talisman race temporarily. This was because Yi Xian's next move might really force the Li family into a corner. Fian and the others naturally would not reject Yi Xian's arrangement, and they would not even ask any questions. After making arrangements for Fian and the others, Yi Xian spent half a year collecting information about the Li family. Of course, this also included the Li family's subsidiary families. At this time, Yi Xian was holding a jade talisman in his hand. This jade talisman contained all the information he had collected about the Li family. Yi Xian could not use the resources he had brought back from the battlefield of the Lords of Gods because they contained chaotic power of laws. He could not be bothered with them, so he threw them into the devouring space. He would find time to get more of them later. Now, Yi Xian was looking for trouble with the Li family. Among the affiliated families of the Li family, there were 3 sects, 4 factions, and 5 clans. These 12 forces were the most powerful among the affiliated forces of the Li family, and were the most helpful to the Li family. Yi Xian's goal this time was very simple. Before he left home, he had to deal with the 3 sects, 4 factions, and 5 great clans. Remove the Li family's minions one by one. Ding! System notification. Data recording complete. Following the system's notification, Yi Xian casually crushed the jade talisman. In Yi Xian's opinion, it was more reliable to leave the information with the system. Ding! System notification. Based on the host's current strength, it is recommended that the host set his first target as the Qi family. Qi family? System. Tell me the general situation of the Qi family. Ding! System notification. The Qi family is one of the affiliated forces of the Li family. They mainly operate 3 god crystal mines, a divine beast farm, and a divine beast hunting chamber of commerce. They provide the Li family with countless resources. The Qi family's patriarch is a divine king. In addition, the Qi family has 72 divine monarchs. Yi Xian nodded. With Yi Xian's current strength, he could indeed kill a divine king and 72 divine monarchs. Since that was the case, he would start with the Qi family. The Qi family's 3 major ore veins produced a large amount of divine realm ores, and the quality was quite good. Moreover, these 3 ore veins had many associated ores, which had always been the focus of the Qi family's operations. It could be said that each ore vein was heavily guarded by the Qi family. On this day, a young man came to the Qi family's mines. You want to be recruited to mine ores? Yes, I know the rules of the Qi family's mines. 1% of the profits can be taken away. I want to save some divine realm crystals and go home to marry a wife. This young man was dressed very ordinarily, and his appearance was also very bashful. Hee, interesting. Alright, you can go. This is your identity token. Since you know the rules of the Qi family's mines, you should also know that once you enter, you can't leave for 100 years. Understand? Yes, of course I understand. There are several uncles in our town working in the Qi family's mines. The young man said confidently. It's good that you know. Go in. Who else could this young man be but Yi Xian? When Yi Xian walked in, he could clearly hear the voice of the Qi family's guards behind him. That silly boy, he actually volunteered to work in the mines. I heard that the last batch of slaves are almost all dead. As for those who volunteer to work in the mines, it's even rarer. I didn't think that there would be a fool willing to go in. If this brat is lucky, he might really be able to come out alive. Didn't our Qi family change the rules? As long as one is willing to join, the treatment will be improved. Who knows, he might really be able to come out alive. When that happens, it will be great. How could it be so easy to earn enough divine crystals to leave the Qi family's divine crystal mine? The Qi family had the backing of the Li family, so when they did things, they were very domineering. If it wasn't for the strict management of the divine master Mi Li, the Qi family would probably still send slaves to work in the mines. As for the slaves, everyone knew that it was already good enough that half of them were real slaves. As for the rest, most of them were secretly captured. The mine Yixian was going to was the Qi family's largest mine. There were more than 300,000 miners inside. Every day, these miners were required to mine a certain amount of ores. If they didn't complete the task, they would be beaten, scolded, or even executed. Most of these miners were only deities. It could be said that they couldn't resist at all. Once they entered the mine, almost no one could survive 100 years. Of course, Yixian didn't say that he was going to let them mine. From the moment he entered, Yixian's figure disappeared. This time, he was only going to set up restrictions. He wanted to make the Qi family's mine disappear completely. If it weren't for the many innocent people inside, Yixian wouldn't have even bothered to sneak in. 3 days later, Yixian finished setting up the restrictions. Then, he set up a dozen teleportation portals at the same time. The location of these teleportation portals was shockingly the Lin Feng realm. Before Yixian arrived, he had already informed the Lin Feng realm that they would be ready to receive these people at any time. Then, Yixian had the 1,000 Beast Sword Attendants and Blossom Sword Attendants all go out and spread the news. He then led the miners out of the teleportation portals. As for the guards, to Yixian, silently exterminating these guards was only a matter of a single sentence. The 6-syllable mantra and the death symbol incantation were no joke. What happened inside the mine was completely unknown to the people outside. Without anyone noticing, the 300,000 people inside the mine were secretly moved away by Yixian. Only when everything was ready did Yixian swagger out of the room. The Qi family had more than 10,000 people stationed here, but none of them noticed Yixian's actions. Chapter 2339. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The divine crystal mine that the Qi clan had been operating for many years disappeared just like that. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Amidst the earth-shaking explosion, the entire divine crystal mine was blown up into nothingness. It could be said that the Qi clan would have to pay a great price if they wanted to reopen this mine. However, the Qi clan didn't even have time to react from the first explosion before a second one rang out. Their second divine crystal mine was turned into ruins once more. The Qi clan was furious. Who was it? Who was it that was going against the Qi clan? However, there was no news. No one could find out who was behind this. Helpless, the Qi clan could only mobilize a large number of people to reinforce the last divine crystal mine. After all, if the last divine crystal mine was destroyed, the Qi clan would suffer a great loss. It wasn't impossible for them to not be able to recover from this setback. Yixian looked at the divine crystal mine from afar. At this time, the surroundings of the divine crystal mine were densely packed with countless restrictions. The Qi clan's disciples were patrolling back and forth, making it seem as if no one could enter the mine. However, Yixian waved his hand and his figure disappeared without a trace. Yixian swaggered into the divine crystal mine. No matter how the people around him searched, they couldn't find Yixian's whereabouts. The concealment function of the wings of the gods wasn't something that could be broken just like that. Soon, Yixian arrived at the interior of the divine crystal mine. It was almost the same as the previous 2 times. Yixian directly set up restrictions and then set up a teleportation formation, preparing to send the miners away. However, the Qi clan had suffered 2 losses already. How could they not be prepared this time? In fact, the Qi clan's people had long been lying in ambush among the miners. As soon as Yixian made a move, the Qi clan immediately took action. More than 30 experts from the Qi clan directly appeared beside Yixian, not giving Yixian a chance to escape. The Qi clan actually set up such a trap and waited for Yixian to take the bait. So it's you. Brat, who are you? Why are you causing trouble in my Qi family? Someone stepped forward and asked Yixian. It was obvious that he was very angry. Who are you? Yixian did not answer the man's question. Instead, he asked about the man's identity. Humph, brat. I'm the Qi family's patriarch, Qi Chen. Don't tell me you didn't investigate before finding trouble with my Qi family? Qi Chen's gaze towards Yixian was already filled with monstrous killing intent. Why do I have to know who you are? So what if he was the patriarch of the Qi family? Originally, I was prepared to spare your life, But I didn't expect that you would seek death yourself. Brat, don't be too arrogant. You dare to say such words? I think you're the one courting death. What are you all waiting for? Go. Take down this damned bastard. Qi Chen ordered loudly. He hated Yi Xian to the core. After all, the losses that Yi Xian had caused to the Qi family were simply incalculable. Following Qi Chen's order, two powerhouses from the Qi family attacked without hesitation. Needless to say, these two people were both low-grade divine lords. Logically speaking, they should be relatively strong. The two of them joined hands and directly charged towards Yi Xian. However, a scene that caused everyone to be alarmed appeared. Yi Xian had only casually swung his sword twice, but the two powerful rays of light instantly killed the two Qi family powerhouses. Yes, it was an instant kill. The two Qi family powerhouses did not even have the ability to fight back. They were killed with a single slash. What was this? Everyone looked at Yi Xian with astonishment. Yi Xian was only a divine lord. How could he instantly kill the Qi family's powerhouses who were also divine lords? How did he do it? For a moment, no one dared to continue attacking. However, just because the Qi family didn't take the initiative to attack didn't mean that Yi Xian wouldn't either. The current Yi Xian was, at the very least, a super expert with a title of emperor level. Crushing an opponent of the same level wouldn't be the slightest bit troublesome. Deity-slaying slash. Yi Xian waved his hand and the god-slaying sword in his hand immediately erupted with 7 rays of light. Without a doubt, 7 Qi family powerhouses were killed. These powerhouses who were also divine lords couldn't even withstand a single blow from Yi Xian. You. Who exactly are you? Why do you have such strong combat strength? What enmity does my Qi family have with you? Why do you want to exterminate my Qi family? Qi Chen stared at Yi Xian. The current Qi Chen was already terrified of Yi Xian. At the beginning, Qi Chen had felt disdain for Yi Xian because he was only a divine lord. Now, there was only endless fear in his heart. How was this a combat strength that a low-level divine lord could possess? Not to mention a fellow low-level divine lord powerhouse. Even a middle-level divine lord powerhouse did not even have the slightest chance to fight back in front of him. Killed with a single slash. It was as if these divine lord powerhouses weren't worthy of Yi Xian's second slash. Every time he attacked, he only needed 1 slash. However, this 1 slash was enough to kill all his opponents. The Qi family's members were forced to retreat as soon as they exchanged blows with Yi Xian. Damn it, damn it. Who exactly are you? Why do you have such strong combat strength? Stop right there. Boom. A berserk force was transmitted out, finally stopping Yi Xian's madness. However, in that split second, more than 30 experts of the Qi family had been killed by 2/3. At the moment, there were only a dozen people left around Qi Chen. Furthermore, it was obvious that these people were terrified of Yi Xian. How was this a battle? This was clearly a one-sided slaughter. Ding! System notification. Target specified. Grade 8 mid-level divine lord. A grade 8 mid-level divine lord. Qi Chen's strength was considered decent. However, it was obvious that this wasn't enough in front of Yi Xian. At the moment, Qi Chen was about to go crazy. This guy who had appeared out of nowhere had targeted the Qi family without asking why. It would have been fine if this guy's strength had been average. However, the key was that this guy's strength was incomparably strong. Killing existences of the same level was as simple as chopping vegetables. Qi Chen stopped his subordinates from attacking and looked at Yi Xian again. He no longer had his previous arrogance. Instead, he asked in a slightly restrained manner, "Who exactly are you? What grudges do you have with the Qi family? If I remember correctly, the Qi family doesn't know you. Why are you causing trouble for the Qi family?" Yi Xian smiled faintly and said indifferently, "That's right. The Qi family doesn't have any grudges with me. However, you've sided with the wrong person." Sided with the wrong person? Wait a minute, what do you mean by that? Who has the Qi family sided with? Chapter 2340. What? Are you going to abandon the Li family to save your life? Didn't you seek refuge with the Li family? The Li family? Sir, you must be mistaken. Although our Qi family has dealings with the Li family, we can only be considered as business partners at most, not allies. 135-7924? If you have a grudge with the Li family, You can go find the Li family. Why are you looking for trouble with my Qi family? This guy is about to die, but he still wants to quibble? Does he really think Yi Xian is so easy to fool? Deity slaying slash. Suddenly, Yi Xian swung his sword and killed a member of the Qi family without any explanation. Then he said indifferently, "What? Do you think I'm easy to fool? Or do you think your acting skills are really good? Yi Xian won't kill innocent people, but that doesn't mean he's a soft-hearted person." "Sir, what do you mean? When did I lie to you? Looks like you still don't want to give up. Fine, I'll make an exception today and start a massacre." Yi Xian gestured and prepared to attack again. Who knew that this time, Qi Chen couldn't hold back anymore. Although Qi Chen had a higher cultivation, Yi Xian's fighting strength was much stronger. If the two of them really fought, they wouldn't be able to do anything to each other. Therefore, Qi Chen didn't dare to attack Yi Xian. Because unlike Yi Xian, Qi Chen still had the Qi family holding him back. Unless Qi Chen was prepared to completely give up on the Qi family, he couldn't say that he could face Yi Xian so calmly. "Wait. I admit that our Qi family is indeed dependent on the Li family. However, in this world where the strong preys on the weak, if we don't rely on the Li family and use the Li family's strength to intimidate our enemies, I'm afraid our enemies would have already killed us. However, even if we rely on the Li family, so what? If you have any grudges with the Li family, you can go directly to them. Why are you looking for trouble with my Qi family?" Qi Chen was very excited. Yi Xian was powerful, but it was only because they were attached to the Li family that he was looking for trouble with them. This was simply unacceptable, but unfortunately, there was nothing he could do. Riwan are, "Alright, I'll give your Qi family a chance to choose. From now on, you withdraw from the Li family alliance and publicly announce that you will no longer have anything to do with the Li family. If so, I can spare your Qi family. Otherwise, I'll let your entire Qi family live in fear forever." Was this Yi Xian's true goal? To force the Qi family to withdraw from the alliance with the Li family? Would the Qi family dare to do such a thing? After all, doing so was undoubtedly equivalent to offending the Li clan. Qi Chen hesitated. He looked at Yi Xian but couldn't answer for a long time. However, he also knew that delaying like this wouldn't solve the problem. In the end, he compromised. He gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, I promise you that the Qi family will withdraw from the alliance with the Li family and make an announcement." Qi Chen didn't have a choice. If he didn't agree, who knew what Yi Xian would do to the Qi family? Even if he agreed and made an announcement, he could tell the Li family about what happened today when the Li family's people came. Then, the Li family wouldn't find trouble with the Qi family. Qi Chen thought that his idea was very correct. However, he didn't know that he was still being schemed against by Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't care whether the Li family's affiliated families were sincere in betraying the Li family or not. As long as they made a public announcement, it was enough. The Qi family's announcement of betrayal naturally attracted the attention of many forces. However, what the Qi family didn't expect was that the Li family didn't give them any chance to explain. The moment they made a move, they suppressed the Qi family. The Qi family didn't die at the hands of Yi Xian. Instead, they all died at the hands of the Li family. Perhaps the Li family was just trying to establish their prestige, so that the affiliated families wouldn't follow the Qi family's example. Unfortunately, by doing so, they'd already fallen into Yi Xian's trap. 3 months later, Yi Xian forced another small family to announce their withdrawal from the Li family's alliance. Without any suspense, the Li family went all out to suppress them again. In just 3 months, the Li family directly suppressed 2 families. All of a sudden, the Li family's affiliated families were in danger. They didn't know which family would be the next to be suppressed by the Li family. In addition, Yi Xian deliberately created a rumor that spread among the Li family's affiliated families. The Li family was preparing to annex all the affiliated families to strengthen their own strength. Yes, it was just a small piece of news. It could be said that this rumor was full of loopholes and wasn't worth believing at all. However, the Li family's affiliated families still believed it. Yi Xian cleverly used people's hearts. Yi Xian knew that the Li family's affiliated families had been under the Li family's rule for a long time. In fact, they were ready to move and would be on guard against the Li family at any time. However, the Li family's suppression of the affiliated families didn't dispel the doubts in their hearts. On the contrary, It made them even more afraid of the Li family and even more vigilant against them. Yi Xian was slowly tearing apart the Li family's power and making it collapse bit by bit. Of course, there were also some factions that were loyal to the Li family. For such factions there was only one fate. The Heaven Domination sect was one of the Li family's affiliated sections. It was also one of the more powerful sects among the 3 sects, 4 groups and 5 great families. This time, Yi Xian went to find this sect. The Heaven Domination sect was different from the Qi family. This was a pure sect. All the disciples were focused on increasing their strength. Once they were strong enough, many of them would serve the Li family and become their hired thugs. The Heaven Domination sect's strength was very concentrated. Apart from the disciples who were recruited by the Li family, all the disciples of the Heaven Domination sect were gathered in the sect to cultivate. Today, Yi Xian came to the Heaven Domination sect, ready to gnaw on this tough bone. Stop. This is the Heaven Domination sect. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter. A disciple blocked Yi Xian's path, not allowing Yi Xian to continue. Yi Xian casually waved his hand, and a sword light shot out. He didn't even bother to explain before he killed the disciple. Damn it, how dare you kill a disciple of the Heaven Domination sect? I think you're tired of living. The other disciples of the Heaven Domination sect issued an alarm while charging towards Yi Xian on the other side. Yi Xian didn't care so much. If 1 came he would kill 1. If 2 came he would kill a pair. He didn't even say a word from the start. Ding! System notification. A strong killing intent has been detected. The host is advised to evade immediately. Chapter 2341. Yi Xian didn't hesitate in the slightest. His figure flashed and he immediately stood there. By the time the experts from the Heaven Domination sect arrived, Yi Xian was already gone. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, in the next moment, Yi Xian launched another surprise attack from another direction. After all, there were only a few experts from the Heaven Domination sect. To Yi Xian, even if they were ordinary low-level divine monarchs, Yi Xian wouldn't care about them. As a result, Yi Xian continued his slaughter, but the people from the Heaven Domination sect couldn't do anything to him. Yi Xian's slaughter continued, and the elders of the Heaven Domination sect could only run for their lives. However, the corpses of the ordinary disciples that Yi Xian killed were all absorbed into Yi Xian's devouring space. After all, Yi Xian had a grudge with the Li family, but he didn't have any grudges with the ordinary disciples of the Heaven Domination sect. Hence, if there was a chance in the future, Yi Xian would revive them. One side was the one initiating the attack, and he was alone. He could go wherever he wanted. As for the other side, they could only defend themselves. One was in the light, one was in the dark. It was obvious who had the upper hand. The people from the Heaven Domination sect were in a frenzy, but they couldn't do anything. Yi Xian didn't even know how many disciples he had killed. Finally, all the disciples of the Heaven Domination sect hid in the main hall. Only then did Yi Xian's slaughter stop. However, when Yi Xian saw the people from the Heaven Domination sect hiding in the main hall, he turned around and left without any hesitation. After all, there were many other powers that could cause trouble for him. Yi Xian wouldn't waste all his time on a small sect like the Heaven Domination sect. As time passed, Yi Xian's slaughter continued. The 3 sects, 4 factions, and 5 great families could be said to have Yi Xian knocking on their doors one by one. These subordinates of the Li family were either forced out of the Li family by Yi Xian and then suppressed by the Li family, or like the Heaven Domination sect, they were forced to hole up in a small area, unable to move. It could be said that almost all the affiliated forces of the Li family had collapsed. The people of the Li family knew very well that someone was against them, but they didn't know who it was. Yi Xian was like a ghost, moving around the Li family. No matter how many traps the Li family set up to lure Yi Xian into the trap, it was completely useless. These traps either did not wait for Yi Xian to appear, or they waited for Yi Xian to destroy them. All of a sudden, the entire Li family was in a state of panic, and no one dared to go out. As for the affiliated families of the Li family, it was even more difficult. If they continued to follow the Li family, then they would have to face the continuous attacks of the Yi Xian. However, if they dared to betray the Li family, then they would face a great disaster. Perhaps only Yi Xian could force an ancient family into such a miserable state by himself. After all, with the system at hand, Yi Xian was able to evade capture time and time again, and he could also discover the real weakness of the enemy's defense. However, no matter how careful Yi Xian was, there were still times when he made a mistake. On this day, Yi Xian randomly found a target, activated the concealment function of the wings of the gods, and walked forward. During this period of time, he had carried out such an attack too many times, so he was already familiar with it. Yi Xian's target this time was a small stronghold of the Li family. Yi Xian had already investigated the number of people in this stronghold. There were only 13 disciples of the Li family and a few servants. Therefore, Yi Xian was prepared to destroy this stronghold directly. Normally, this was a very simple matter, and there shouldn't be any accidents. However, with Yi Xian's continuous actions, how could the Li family say that they didn't have any tricks up their sleeves? In fact, this stronghold was a trap. The Li family had paid a huge price to set up a concealment restriction in this stronghold. Under normal circumstances, Yi Xian would probably be able to see through such a restriction at a glance. However, Yi Xian was a little numb to his recent victories. Therefore, he made a mistake this time. Yi Xian directly barged into the stronghold. He didn't care about anything else and immediately started killing. Yi Xian didn't know how many of these low-level disciples he had killed during this period of time. However, all of a sudden, a strong pressure suddenly erupted. This pressure was so strong that Yi Xian had no choice but to stop in his tracks. Yi Xian stared fixedly at the core of the stronghold. At this moment, Yi Xian finally saw that it was a concealment restriction. Damn it! I was careless this time, Yi Xian said in annoyance. However, it was too late to say this now. 3 figures rushed out of the restriction. 2 of them were mid-level divine lords, while the other was a high-level divine lord. You're Yi Xian. Suddenly, the high-level divine lord guy looked at Yi Xian and said in surprise. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. He didn't expect that he would actually meet someone who knew him. So what if I am? Yi Xian, what did my Li family do to provoke you? Why do you have to harass my Li family like this? If you have the ability, then come out. What kind of ability is it to secretly attack my Li family's subsidiary family? Unexpectedly, that person became angry when he heard Yi Xian admit it. Yi Xian glanced coldly at that person but didn't pay him any attention. He wasn't stupid. The Li family was strong and had countless experts. Yi Xian wasn't even worth mentioning in front of the Li family. If they really faced off, then Yi Xian had no chance of winning. Therefore, Yi Xian could only weaken the Li family's strength step by step. Have you said enough? If you've said enough, then prepare to die. Yi Xian didn't care about what that person had to say. With a wave of his hand, the 1,000 beast sword servants and deity flower sword servants rushed out. The moment they appeared, they summoned their divine mounts and the deity flower sword servants. At the same time, Yi Xian also rushed forward with the Godslayer in hand. Yi Xian, you're courting death. How dare you offend my Li family? You'll know what it means to live a life worse than death. Humph, I didn't expect that the person who attacked my Li family during this period of time was you, you damned thing. However, today, I'll kill you with my own hands. The person said arrogantly. High-ranked Divine Lord Realm Cultivation indeed gave him the qualifications to say such words. Unfortunately, he had chosen the wrong person. System, devour all the resources I've collected during this period of time. Humph, today, I'll let this guy know what despair is. Yi Xian had naturally obtained a lot of resources during this period of battle. However, Yi Xian didn't devour them. Instead, he kept them. In addition to the resources produced by devouring the space, it could be said that Yi Xian now had a large amount of resources to devour. Previously, Yi Xian hadn't leveled up because he was too lazy to do so. After all, there wasn't a decent opponent. However, today, Yi Xian needed to devour those resources. As countless resources were devoured, the system's notification sounded. Ding! The host has broken through. The host is now a low-level 7th grade Divine Lord. He had broken through several levels in a row. However, this was the result of Yi Xian accumulating resources over a long period of time. It could be said that this was Yi Xian's accumulation eruption. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was still somewhat dissatisfied. He originally thought that he could break through to the mid-level Divine Lord in one go. Chapter 2342. You actually broke through? How is that possible? Could it be that you were hiding your true strength? Good. Yi Xian. You really are a genius. How long has it been since you joined the Kunlun realm? You actually improved so much. However, you shouldn't have offended our Li family. I will give you a chance now. If you are willing to submit to the Li family, then we can let bygones be bygones and pretend that nothing happened. How about it? Were they trying to recruit Yi Xian? Unfortunately, Yi Xian couldn't accept it at all. He was just a mere Li clan, yet he wanted to subdue Yi Xian. He was thinking too much. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. You want me to submit to the Li family? Do you have the qualifications? Such arrogance, Yi Xian. Who do you think you are? How dare you be so presumptuous? The Li family is an ancient aristocratic family. How can you imagine our strength? What, do you think that you can challenge the authority of the Li family by harassing our subordinate families? To tell you the truth, these subordinate families are just dogs that the Li family raised. The Li family has always followed the principle of the main family being strong. We have casually raised a few subordinate families and never paid attention to them. In fact, even if all the subordinate families were combined, they would not be able to match up to a single branch family of the Li family. Yi Xian, oh Yi Xian, do you really think that you have any influence on the Li family? You're just a clown. As long as any of the elders of the Li family notices you, you will die without a burial place. Since we are both disciples of the Kunlun realm, I will give you a chance today. Join the Li family and I will guarantee your safety. Otherwise, you will die without a doubt. This person was also a disciple of the Kunlun realm. But how could Yi Xian listen to his nonsense? No matter how strong the Li family was, Yi Xian wouldn't care. Are you done with your nonsense? Yi Xian pulled out the god-slaying sword, not wanting to waste any more words with this guy. Humph, arrogant brat, since you want to die, then I will fulfill your wish. You too, what are you waiting for? Go. Yi Xian, today, I will show you the strength of the Li family's main family disciples. In an instant, the two mid-level Divine Sovereign Realm guys pounced on Yi Xian. Ding. System notification. Target has been set. 3rd grade General Middle Class Divine Lord. Ding. System. Middle-level Divine Sovereign Divine Realm. They turned out to be two guys with titles in the general realm. It seems that the Li family really has some secret methods to improve their strength. One had to know that it wasn't a simple matter to obtain the title of Front Crown. Slaying slash. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and directly slashed out with his sword. However, who would have thought that this time, his attack didn't have the slightest effect. The two of them were extremely agile and were even proficient in combination attacks. Yi Xian's attack was actually easily blocked by them. Yi Xian, is that all you have? If that's the case, then you can go to hell. Behind the two people, the expert said calmly, with a look of disdain in his eyes. Was this the true strength of the Li family's disciples? Could it be that Yi Xian's previous actions were really like what this person said? That no one in the Li family cared about it at all? But so what? Today, Yi Xian was going to kill these three people. Wei Zhentian, magic treasure form. In an instant, Wei Zhentian immediately changed. What Yi Xian didn't expect was that this time, another god-slaying sword appeared in Wei Zhentian's magic treasure form. Yes, it was the god-slaying sword. He didn't expect Wei Zhentian to be able to transform into the god-slaying sword. The power of the god-slaying sword was needless to say. Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all and directly chose Wei Zhentian's form. System, how many devour points do I need to fix Wei Zhentian's god-slaying sword form? Ding. System notification. Fixing Wei Zhentian's god-slaying sword form requires 5 devour points. 5 devour points? That's not much. System, use faith points to exchange for 5 devour points. I want to have Wei Zhentian's god-slaying sword form. Ding. Host used faith points to exchange for 5 devour points successfully. Ding. Wei Zhentian's god-slaying sword form has been successfully fixed. Ding. System notification. Wei Zhentian is the weapon spirit of the god-slaying sword. Therefore he can control both god-slaying swords at the same time. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled into a smile. Yi Xian was extremely satisfied with this result. However, it was obvious that there was still a difference between the two god-slaying swords. Yi Xian's own god-slaying sword could be upgraded, but the god-slaying sword that Wei Zhentian had transformed into couldn't be upgraded at all. Re-1R, Wei Zhentian, I'll leave the god-slaying sword to you. Kill them. In an instant, the two identical god-slaying swords rushed toward the two people under Wei Zhentian's control. Wei Zhentian controlled both god-slaying swords at the same time without any hindrance. Yi Xian was very happy that Wei Zhentian's weapon form had turned into a god-slaying sword. However, he also had some other thoughts. The god-slaying sword seemed to be unable to keep up with Yi Xian's battle rhythm. Although the god-slaying sword could still suppress the enemy, this advantage seemed to be less obvious as Yi Xian's level increased. Compared to Yi Xian's increasingly powerful enemies, Yi Xian was facing more and more powerful enemies. It seemed that it was time to upgrade the god-slaying sword. The god-slaying sword could devour resources to achieve the purpose of upgrading. However, because Yi Xian did not have enough resources for himself, he did not consider upgrading the god-slaying sword. However, it now seemed that upgrading the god-slaying sword was imminent. Moreover, Yi Xian realized that once Wei Zhentian controlled the god-slaying sword to fight, Yi Xian could only fight with his bare hands. This was not the result Yi Xian wanted. Yi Xian had to solve this problem as well. Of course, these problems could only be solved one step at a time. Yi Xian did not expect to complete all of them in one go. The two god-slaying swords continued to attack in the air. They were actually evenly matched with the two Li family disciples. Not bad. I didn't expect you to be stronger than the rumors say. It seems that if I don't do it myself, I won't be able to do anything to you. Suddenly, a voice was heard. It was the young master of the Li family, who had not made any moves. As soon as he finished speaking, the young master of the Li family had already launched an attack. He threw out a special magic treasure that was shaped like a crescent moon. In an instant, it formed a special domain. Chapter 2343. Yi Xian, to be able to witness my moonlight field, you can be considered to have died a worthy death. There's no need to struggle in vain. In my moonlight field, your cultivation will be constantly suppressed and whittled away. 135, 7924? 6810 GGGGGD, that person said proudly. At the same time, the system notification sounded. Ding. System notification. Detected that the host is in a special field. His cultivation is dropping rapidly. Ding. Host's cultivation has dropped to 7th grade Spirit Monarch. Ding. Host's cultivation has dropped to 7th grade King Spirit Monarch. What's going on? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He had never encountered such a situation before. Re-1R system. Analyze the moonlight field. I want to see how this field can suppress my cultivation. Ding. System notification. Analyzing data. Analysis successful. Ding. The moonlight field absorbs the rare moonlight of the realm of the gods as its source of energy. It has an extremely strong corrosive ability. In the moonlight field, the source of the moonlight will constantly corrode any energy, whether it's divine power or the power of the laws. The source of the moonlight will slowly corrode and continuously reduce the opponent's strength. Moonlight source? Yi Xian knew that in the realm of the gods, there were almost no nights because of the existence of the 10 suns. However, this did not mean that there was no night. In fact, there were indeed a few minutes of moonlight every day. However, those few minutes had long been forgotten by people. Who would have thought that the young master of the Li family would actually cultivate something like the source of the moonlight? Only a few minutes a day. To cultivate something like that required a lot of perseverance. Moreover, without some special opportunity, it would be impossible to achieve anything in one's lifetime. Yi Xian had seen many powers of the laws, but this was the first time he had seen one that used moonlight. Yi Xian's strength was constantly being corroded and decreased. Yi Xian knew that it would be impossible for him to defeat this guy, at least for today. You're not bad. It seems that I've underestimated the Li family. Well then, let's call it a day. Wei Zhentian, come back. Along with Yi Xian's words, the god-slaying sword and Wei Zhentian returned to Yi Xian's side at the same time. At the same time, Yi Xian's figure disappeared. Damn it, it's the power of the space law. This Yi Xian actually grasped the power of the space law. Chase after him. We must kill this guy. Seeing Yi Xian's figure gradually disappear, how could the Li family's young master not understand what had happened? However, he still couldn't understand why Yi Xian had grasped the power of the laws of space. There were many different kinds of laws. The most common ones were the laws of time, the laws of space, the laws of life, the laws of 5 elements, etc. These were the most common powers of law. Although they were the easiest to cultivate, they were also the most difficult to cultivate successfully. Why did so many people choose unpopular or even useless nomological laws to cultivate? The fundamental reason was because of the difficulty of the process. The rarer a law was, the easier it was to cultivate it successfully. This was also considered a balance. Therefore, although everyone knew about the laws of space, there were very few people who truly grasped it. On the other hand, those unknown laws were the most common. For example, the law of moonlight that the Li family's young master cultivated. Wasn't it a relatively unimportant law power? At this moment, Xianxia had already used the power of teleportation to quickly leave the moonlight domain. Although the moonlight domain had a powerful corrosive ability, its power was actually only average. After Xianxia left, he started to ponder. It seemed that the Li family's affiliated families and people he had encountered earlier weren't the Li family's core strength at all. Could it be that the Li family was really that powerful? During this period of slaughter, Xianxia had killed countless disciples of the Li family and its affiliated families. However, Xianxia's sharp senses told him that this was simply a waste of time. Killing those ordinary disciples wouldn't bring Xianxia any benefits at all. Instead, it would be a waste of Xianxia's time. It seemed that this kind of operation could only be put on hold for now. To deal with a colossus like the Li family, it wasn't that easy to eliminate them. They could only take it one step at a time. Xianxia directly returned to the Kunlun mirror. Since the Li family was temporarily out of the picture, Xianxia couldn't do anything about it. In that case, he might as well go to the mysterious lake to level up first. Moreover, Xianxia had to hurry up and improve his strength because the Divine Master Arena was getting closer and closer. Although there was no fixed time for the Divine Master Arena to be held, since Mi Yan had already sought out Xianxia, it was obvious that the Divine Master Arena would be held soon. It might even be held at the very next moment. It wasn't impossible. Therefore, Xianxia had to improve his strength as much as possible before the Divine Master Arena was held. System: send me to the mysterious lake. The mysterious lake, Xianxia's personal training ground, and the purple and golden blood were always giving off an unusual feeling. However, Xianxia still didn't know what secrets were hidden there. Ding! System notification. Teleportation activated. Ding! Teleportation successful. This time, Xianxia came to the mysterious lake. It didn't seem to be any different from the previous times he came here. Therefore, Xianxia didn't waste any time and immediately started looking for his target. With the notification of Xianxia's strength, the divine beasts around the mysterious lake were no longer enough to satisfy Xianxia's appetite. It could be said that these divine beasts posed no threat to Xianxia at all. Therefore, Xianxia began to move forward in search of higher-level divine beasts to be his opponent. Even though Xianxia had been to the mysterious lake several times, he still didn't understand what was going on. The divine beasts here were generally of a very high level. Moreover, many of them had special abilities. In addition, killing these divine beasts would give him a drop of golden blood, which made this place seem even more extraordinary. A large number of high-level divine beasts gathered together and the mysterious lake gave this place a strange feeling. However, Xianxia didn't care about this at all, even though he knew very well that there was definitely something wrong with this place. To Xianxia, the only use of this place was as a training ground. Yes, this is a good target. It suits the current me. Xianxia nodded. This time, the target that swordsman Wuxia brought back for Xianxia was a little special. Strictly speaking, he couldn't be called a divine beast anymore. Instead, he was an existence similar to a spiritual god. This was a spiritual god that cultivated from a plant. Its realm had even reached the mid-tier 6th-stage Divine Lord realm. Although Xianxia was currently only a low-tier Divine Lord realm, he was still a super existence with the title of Emperor Realm. Chapter 2344. Xianxia released his divine telekinesis. At the same time, he ordered the system, detect this target. Ding! Detecting the target. Detection successful. Ding! System notification. Target Thousand Vine Supremacy, 6th-stage Divine Lord. Thousand Vine Supremacy was originally an ancient spiritual vine that grew around the mysterious lake. As time passed, Thousand Vine Supremacy absorbed the mysterious lake's energy and evolved into its current form. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD ding. System notification. Host, please take note. The target has a special ability. Host is advised to avoid fighting with it. The system suddenly added, causing Xian to frown slightly. Although the system did not issue an alarm this time, telling Xian to avoid fighting was no different from warning him. Re-1RA middle level 6th grade Divine Lord? In any case, Xian was a 7th stage Divine Lord. It did not mean that he did not have the ability to fight. In other words, the system was mainly reminding Xian to take note of the Thousand Vine Supremacy's special ability. Xian unsheathed the Godslayer. He wanted to see what was so special about this guy. Thousand Beast Sword Servants. Deity Flower Sword Servants. Go. Following Xian's order, the Thousand Beast Sword Servants and Deity Flower Sword Servants led the Deity Flower Sword Servants and charged forward. Xian's figure moved, preparing to move as well. However, at this moment, a terrifying scene occurred. Rumble. Kacha kacha. A series of strange sounds rang out. Then, strange changes occurred in a radius of 10,000 miles at the same time. Vines rose from the ground, piercing through the clouds. In the sky, countless vines crisscrossed, and mysterious fruits appeared one after another. On the ground, the vines tangled together, making it so that not a single piece of land could be seen. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the blink of an eye, the Thousand Beast Sword Servants, Divine Beast Mounts, Flowery God Sword Servants, and 100 Flower God were either killed or trapped by the vines. In the blink of an eye, the Thousand Vine Supremacy had actually created this peculiar domain. Ding. Warning. 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 Host, please take note. The host is in a special space and is in extreme danger. The host is advised to evacuate immediately. Ding. System notification. Reverend Thousand Vines' realm has been refreshed. He is currently at the peak of the King level, high-grade Divine Lord realm. Ding. System notification. Warning, warning, special attack detected. The series of alarms made Xian dumbfounded. In the blink of an eye, he had been completely defeated? What exactly was this terrifying Reverend Thousand Vines? How could he hide his cultivation? What was his goal? Xian was surrounded by green divine light. These light rays weaved through each other like vines, trapping Xian within. Xian didn't know what this thing was, but he was sure that it wasn't anything good. God-slaying slash. Xian tried to slash at the divine light rays, but it was useless. Xian's sword light was swallowed up by the green divine light rays. In the blink of an eye, Xian was completely enveloped by the cocoon weaved by the energy light rays. It was only at this moment that a voice finally sounded. You're finally here, human. Xian naturally knew that this voice belonged to the Thousand Vine Supremacy, but Xian didn't know what this guy was trying to do. Although Xian was at an absolute disadvantage, the Thousand Vine Supremacy didn't attack Xian. There was no doubt that he had other motives. What are you trying to do? Xian raised his head and looked ahead, although he didn't know where the Thousand Vine Supremacy was. Human, I've been observing you since you entered this place. Although your combat strength isn't great, you have many tricks up your sleeve. Most importantly, you can leave this place at will, so only you can complete this mission. Mission? Xian was slightly taken aback. At the same time, a system notification popped up. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for discovering the hidden mission, the Thousand Vine Supremacy's request. When he heard this notification, Xian knew that he was safe for the time being. Therefore, Xian directly asked the Thousand Vine Supremacy, Senior, what mission are you talking about? However, the Thousand Vine Supremacy acted as if he hadn't heard Xian's question. He continued muttering to himself, I've lived here since I was young. Every day, I see those beasts running around freely. I also want to have that ability, but no matter how hard I try, I can't do it. Xian understood. The Thousand Vine Supremacy wanted Xian to find a way to allow him to move freely. Whether it was a treasure or a law, as long as he could move freely, it was fine. Xian was a little speechless. For a request like this, Xian was a little troubled. However, from this, one could see the sorrow of being a plant. Especially a plant that had intelligence and still wanted to go out and explore the world. Indeed, Many plants had special laws that allowed them to appear wherever they wanted to go. However, the thousand-vine supremacy was just a very ordinary spirit vine. How could it have such special abilities? How should he solve this problem? Yi Xian frowned and thought hard. Suddenly, the system notification popped up again. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for discovering the optional random mission, subduing the thousand-vine supremacy. Subduing this big guy in front of him? Yi Xian asked the system in surprise. System, are you sure I have a way to subdue this big guy? Yi Xian couldn't help but be suspicious. After all, the thousand-vine supremacy was a peak king stage superior divine lord. He also had a special law power. Yi Xian couldn't possibly defeat him, so how could he subdue him? Suddenly, Yi Xian recalled the thousand-vine supremacy's words. The thousand-vine supremacy's request seemed to be to leave this place. It didn't matter if Yi Xian found a treasure or a law. As long as he could move freely, that would be enough. In fact, didn't Yi Xian have a way to do that? The engulfing space. Yi Xian could absorb the thousand-vine supremacy into the engulfing space, then use a seal or a divine talisman to separate a part of his consciousness. Wouldn't that be equivalent to fulfilling the thousand-vine supremacy's wish? Most importantly, once the thousand-vine supremacy entered Yi Xian's engulfing space, he could do whatever he wanted with just a word. When that time came, it wouldn't be the thousand-vine supremacy who wanted to do anything, but Yi Xian. Chapter 2345. After all, Thousand Vines Venerable had always lived near this mysterious lake. He did not have the time to think so much. Therefore, when Yi Xian suggested this idea, he only used his divine telekinesis to scan Yi Xian's devouring space before agreeing without hesitation. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Next, Yi Xian only needed to refine a restriction or talisman to separate divine telekinesis. After careful consideration, Yi Xian chose a restriction, a miniature restriction. A miniature restriction was not a miniature restriction. In fact, a miniature restriction was even more difficult to refine. Refining a miniature restriction required a high level of divine telekinesis. After all, a miniature restriction the size of a strand of hair could explode with terrifying power. It could be said that very few people would refine a miniature restriction. Of course, this wasn't a big deal to Yi Xian. Yi Xian had the system, so what kind of miniature restrictions couldn't he refine? However, Yi Xian could not understand why such a small restriction would require so many resources. Of course, compared to Thousand Vines Venerable, this expenditure was nothing. Soon, Yi Xian finished refining the miniature restriction. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then directly imprinted the miniature restriction on the Qian ring on his finger. Senior, you can enter my space now. You only need to split a strand of divine telekinesis to travel the world with me. Alright. He did not expect Thousand Vines Venerable to be so direct. He did as he said without hesitation. This saved Yi Xian a lot of effort. Countless vines in the sky and on the ground quickly retracted and surged towards Yi Xian's devouring space. Suddenly, a group of little guys attracted Yi Xian's attention. There were not many of them, only a few hundred. However, they followed Thousand Vines Venerable into Yi Xian's devouring space. System, what's that? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. Ding. System notification. Target is Thousand Vines Venerable's companion spirit god. Companion spirit god? Yi Xian had a feeling that he had struck gold this time. As expected, after Thousand Vines Venerable entered the devouring space, the system notification sounded. Ding. System notification. Congratulations to the host for completing the random mission of subduing Thousand Vines Venerable. Thousand Vines Venerable has pledged his loyalty. Thousand Vines Venerable has automatically changed his name to Thousand Vines. Thousand Vines, blessed by the laws, a spirit god of heaven. A heaven and earth spirit god of its own accord. Because he had already produced a companion spirit god clan, he was promoted to an elementary spirit god ancestor. Temporarily unable to detect special abilities of God of Heaven, special abilities of God of Heaven growth, unlimited. Yi Xian was overjoyed. Even though everything Yi Xian saw was unknown, that sentence of unlimited growth potential was the key. How could Yi Xian not understand what that meant? This meant that as long as Yi Xian trained Thousand Vines properly, he would be able to create a tribe of spirit gods. Not only would this tribe of spirit gods be absolutely loyal to Yi Xian, but more importantly, they would be able to grow according to Yi Xian's wishes. In other words, Yi Xian could use his free time to train this tribe of spirit gods. In addition, the devouring space's flow of time was faster than the outside world. Naturally, Yi Xian's training would bear fruit much faster. Moreover, even before the training was complete, Thousand Vines Venerable possessed extremely powerful combat strength. As a peak king true god, he would definitely be of help to Yi Xian. It could be said that this time, Yi Xian had made a huge profit. Besides using some resources to create the miniature restriction, Yi Xian did not suffer any other losses. Of course, harvesting Thousand Vines Venerable would not solve Yi Xian's current predicament. Therefore, Yi Xian did not leave the mysterious lake. Instead, he continued to search for divine beasts to kill. As Yi Xian's strength increased, he no longer had to be on tenterhooks looking for weak divine beasts. At this time, Yi Xian already had the strength to establish himself in the mysterious lake's inner region. Logically speaking, since the mysterious lake was so mysterious, the closer one was to it, the stronger the divine power of the divine beast should be. However, the distribution of divine beasts here was not like that. Instead, the divine beasts closer to the center had lower cultivation bases, while the divine beasts closer to the periphery had higher cultivation bases. Yi Xian also discovered something that surprised Yi Xian. There were very few conflicts between the divine beasts here. Even if a divine beast trespassed into another divine beast's territory, it would not necessarily lead to a conflict. It could be said that the divine beasts here seemed to be a little lazy. As long as they could solve a problem without fighting, they would not do so. Most of the time, they just stayed in their own territories. This phenomenon made Yi Xian rather curious. However, wasn't this convenient for Yi Xian to kill the divine beasts here to level up? Therefore, Yi Xian did not pay too much attention to this. Soon, Yi Xian found a new opponent. It was a divine beast with the strength of a mid-level 6th grade divine lord. Of course, although it was also a mid-level 6th grade divine lord this time, Yi Xian believed that this fellow would not suddenly transform like Thousand Vines Venerable. System: detect what kind of divine beast this fellow is. What's so special about it? Ding. System notice. Target specified. Purple Electric Raging Flames Divine Beast. Possesses lightning and fire laws. Dual laws, and both of them were law powers with powerful offensive power. It seemed that this battle would not be as simple as it seemed. At this time, the sea of Purple Electric Raging Flames Divine Beasts did not pay attention to Yi Xian. This fellow was lying on the ground, and lightning and flames were constantly spewing out from his body. The two violent forces intersected in the air, fighting each other. However, the Purple Electric Raging Flames Divine Beast was not affected in the slightest. Suddenly, the Purple Electric Raging Flames Divine Beast lifted his head. In his eyes, a bolt of lightning and a bolt of fire attacked in the same direction at the same time. Yi Xian was slightly shocked. He did not dare delay and immediately broke through the air. It turned out that Yi Xian had used the Ragnarok cloak to hide and stealthily advance. Who would have thought that the Purple Electric Raging Flames Divine Beast would react so quickly? Boom! Boom! Two huge holes appeared where Yi Xian had just been standing. One hole was filled with flames, while the other hole was filled with lightning. This fellow is really strong. Yi Xian's lips curled slightly. Although he said that, he had already launched his attack. Megatron. Magic Treasure Form. Become the God Slayer. Kill. Chapter 2346. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Wei Zhentian controlled the two God Slayer swords to circle around the purple flame electric beast, waiting for a chance to land a fatal blow. Thousand Beast Swordsman. Deity Swordsman. 135-7924. 6810 GGGGGD. Yi Xian waved his hand and summoned the Thousand Beast Swordsman and Deity Swordsman. In an instant, the Thousand Beast Swordsman and the Deity Swordsman charged forward with 100 Flowers Deity Swordsman. The battle was about to begin. In the sky, the purple flame electric divine beast stood proudly. Around him, countless deity swordsmen sat up and surrounded him. Suddenly, Yi Xian shouted, "Thousand Beasts Feast, begin! Kill him!" Boom! 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 Following Yi Xian's order, the entire sky lit up with all kinds of energy attacks. Countless attacks were directed at the purple flame electric beast, but the purple flame electric beast did not listen and continued to attack. Boom! A huge mountain was blasted away by the violent energy. However, just as he rose into the air, he was surrounded by flames and kept burning. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. Flames, lightning, and other kinds of energy intertwined, making the sky look exceptionally beautiful. The two God-Slayer swords kept swinging the deity Slayer slash. Unfortunately, there was no breakthrough. Yi Xian frowned. If this continued, it would be difficult for him to win. 6 Runes Mantra. Wound. System. Use resources to exchange for the success rate of spiritual control. Wei Zhentian. Get ready to move. Spiritual control. In an instant, with Yi Xian as the center, a vast and mysterious energy rushed toward the purple flame electric divine beast. In the next moment, the purple flame electric divine beast's body froze. Although it was only for a moment, it was enough for Wei Zhentian. Re-1R the two God-Slayer swords attacked the purple flame electric divine beast from both sides at the same time. Boom! Boom! Although the swords did not penetrate the purple flame electric divine beast, the power of the two God-Slayer swords was not easy. The purple flame electric divine beast was already sent flying. So, was this the end of the attack? No, the real killing move had only just begun. Since Yi Xian had obtained the 1,000 vines, he naturally had to use it. Hence at this moment, Yi Xian raised his hand and roared, 1,000 vines! In the blink of an eye, a vine suddenly grew out of Yi Xian's interspatial ring. Furthermore, as they continued to advance, the vine continued to spread rapidly. When they arrived beside the purple flame electric divine beast, the 1,000 vines didn't hesitate in the slightest and directly entangled it. Vines were constantly being set ablaze and destroyed by electricity. However, the thousands of vines grew out at an extremely fast speed. No matter how tenacious the purple flame electric divine beast was, it was almost impossible for him to escape the capture of the 1,000 vines. A moment later, a dignified middle-grade 6th-grade divine lord realm purple flame electric divine beast was actually trapped alive by the 1,000 vines just like that. Let's see how you're going to hide this time. Wei Zhentian, kill him. Yi Xian smirked and gave the order to Wei Zhentian. Puh! Puh! 2 sounds rang out. The two god-slaying swords actually pierced through the purple flame electric divine beast's head. Unfortunately, the purple flame electric divine beast's divine core was in his head. With the divine core shattered, how could the purple flame electric divine beast survive? Devour! Yi Xian waved his hand again, and the purple flame electric divine beast's corpse was devoured by Yi Xian. Ding! The host has broken through. The host is now a low-grade 9th-grade divine lord. He had finally leveled up. However, Yi Xian was a little hesitant after that. This was because the front crown title required him to cultivate again every time he leveled up. In other words, if Yi Xian chose to continue leveling up now, he would lose the current front crown title after leveling up, and his combat strength would be reduced. This front crown title gave Yi Xian the feeling that it was more like the blessing of the power of laws. Otherwise, how could it disappear just like that? Forget it. I won't continue leveling up this time. Since I've subdued Qian Teng, this trip wasn't in vain. I haven't gone to see Fian and the others in a long time. I'll take a look. Yi Xian muttered to himself. Yi Xian had thoroughly offended the Li family, so Yi Xian believed that the Li family would definitely try to kill him if they found out about him under any circumstances. And if he returned to the Kunlun realm, the Li family would also set up all kinds of trouble for him. Therefore, if Yi Xian wanted to find a quiet place to cultivate, the Divine Talisman realm would be the most suitable place for him. Fian and the others were also in the Divine Talisman realm now, so Yi Xian had this idea. However, if Yi Xian wanted to leave this mysterious lake, he would have to teleport to the Kunlun realm first. However, this time, as soon as he teleported back, he found that his residence was surrounded. These people looked quite strange. Not only did they have a third eye, but each of them also had 4 ears. They wore special clothes that gave them the ability to hide, but they didn't use any treasures in their hands. System, detect who these people are. Yi Xian ordered the system. Soon, the system's notification sounded. Ding. System notification. Target 4-eared half-human clan. 4-eared half-human clan? What kind of clan was this? Ding. 4-eared half-human clan. Apart from having 4 ears, They are almost exactly the same as humans. As for their third eye, it is their innate divine ability, four-eared heavenly eye. Ding! Four-eared half-human clan is good at joint attacks. When four-eared heavenly eye is opened, they can communicate with each other. At the same time, every four-eared half-human clan member will domesticate a special divine beast as their natal divine beast. Yi Xian didn't need the system to explain the specifics, because at this moment, the four-eared half-human clan assassins had already launched their attacks. As for Yi Xian, he naturally knew what was different about them. The eyes on the foreheads of the dozen four-eared half-human clan members suddenly emitted a beam of light. This beam of light wasn't an attack, nor was it a defensive method. It was just to connect all of them. Just as the system had described, the four-eared half-human clan members. They had already completely communicated with each other. At the same time, the four-eared half-human clan members stretched out a hand at the same time. At the position of their palms, Yi Xian saw that it was actually a teleportation gate. It was extremely strange. A teleportation gate. How exactly was it built in the palm of their hands? Even Yi Xian couldn't understand this at all. Even Yi Xian couldn't do it. Could it be another innate divine ability? What kind of ability did these four-eared half-human clan members have? At this moment, Yi Feng frowned slightly. Although Yi Xian had seen many divine beasts, Yi Xian didn't know much about the other races. Chapter 2347. Die! What would it feel like to hear dozens of people say the same word at the same time, with the same tone, the same mannerisms, and even the same expressions? Yi Xian would tell you that it would not feel good at all. Humph! Those who seek death are everywhere. Since these people wanted Yi Xian dead, then Yi Xian could only let them die first. Thousand Beasts Sword Attendant. Flower God Sword Attendant. In an instant, the two great sword attendants appeared once again. By now, the two great sword attendants had become Yi Xian's signature move. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. After all, the god-tier mounts and the 100 Flowers avatar were not weak. The key was their numbers. But this time, Yi Xian had met his match. The teleportation portals in the hands of the four-eared half-humans glowed strangely. Then, all sorts of divine beasts appeared from their palms. If there was one thing these divine beasts had in common, it would be their 4 ears. These divine beasts were of different levels of strength, but there were many of them. In just a few moments, there were already more than 100,000 divine beasts surrounding Yi Xian. And this number was still increasing. Were they trying to use the beast wave tactic against Yi Xian? Well then, Yi Xian would like to see if they could release them faster, or if he could kill them faster. Wei Zhentian, magic treasure form, kill them all. In an instant, 2 Godslayer swords appeared at the same time. Their attack was very simple. They just kept spinning. With the Godslayer sword's sharpness, they could easily kill these four-eared divine beasts even without using the deicide slash. As for Yi Xian himself, he was already floating in midair. Yi Xian casually pointed a finger and calmly said, "Spiritual sense control." This time, Yi Xian was using a large area of spiritual sense control. Who said that spiritual control could not be used on a large scale? Yi Xian could control these low-level four-eared divine beasts on a large scale? In an instant, thousands of four-eared divine beasts were controlled by Yi Xian, and they pounced on their companions. It didn't matter if the four-eared divine beasts controlled by Yi Xian died in battle, or if they killed the other four-eared divine beasts. For Yi Xian, this was a win-win situation. What's more, it could cause quite a bit of chaos, so why not? Every time Yi Xian waved his hand, thousands of four-eared divine beasts would betray him. Even if they were to trade 2 for 1, Yi Xian would only need a few attempts to kill 10,000 four-ears mythical beasts. In other words, he wanted them to kill each other. However, the four-eared half-humans did not seem to notice this at all. The seal in their hands continued to spray out four-eared divine beasts. It was spraying. With such a fast release speed, if it wasn't spraying, what was it? However, even with the use of his spiritual sense, Yi Xian still discovered that the speed at which he killed the divine beast of 4 ears could not keep up with the increase in the beast's speed. It seems that this is the only way. Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his hand. 6-syllable mantra. Annihilation. A mysterious power was suddenly activated. What was the use of the 6-syllable mantra? Annihilation? It was an existence that could annihilate the entire clan. although it could only be used against opponents of lower cultivation levels. However, these four-eared divine beasts were not very powerful. They were only using the beast wave tactic. Following Yi Xian's command, countless four-eared divine beasts died instantly, whether they were facing Yi Xian from the front or the back. System: don't waste these corpses. Use the God Slayer to devour them all. Since these guys are willing to give me the corpses of divine beasts, why should I be polite? Devour them to your heart's content. Countless corpses were devoured by the God Slayer. One of the God Slayer's special abilities was to devour resources to level up. Although only a small portion of the divine beast's corpses could help the God Slayer level up, the sheer number of four-eared divine beasts meant that the God Slayer had a bountiful harvest this time. The four-eared half-humans could see that the beast wave tactic was not much of a threat to Yi Xian. Hence, the four-eared half-gods stopped releasing their divine beasts. Instead, they looked at Yi Xian silently. Continue releasing your divine beasts. Yi Xian said nonchalantly with a smile on his face. Yi Xian, don't be so smug. You will definitely die today. Dozens of similar voices rang out. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not care. Suddenly, the teleportation portals in the hands of the four-eared half-humans started to spin rapidly. After a while, the portals changed their appearance. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless sword chi filled the entire sky. It was a frightening sight. However, that was all it could do. Yi Xian did not even need to use any tricks to counter the sword chi. He could just use his physical body to counter it. This was because the damage that the sword chi could do to Yi Xian was not comparable to the recovery speed of the blood of eternity. The four-eared half-humans frowned at the same time. Their sea of beasts and sword-light tactics were actually unable to harm Yi Xian in the slightest. They had never encountered such a situation before. The four-eared half-humans were actually a tribe of assassins for hire. The value of their existence was that they were hired to assassinate the target. However, this time, although they had sent dozens of people, they could not do anything to Yi Xian. Just as Yi Xian was about to kill the four-eared half-humans, he heard a notification from the system. Ding! System notification. Devourable power of order detected. Divine thought-sharing order. What kind of order was this? Although Yi Xian had seen all kinds of strange order, this was the first time Yi Xian had heard of the divine thought-sharing order. However, no matter what, Yi Xian was not going to let go of the opportunity to devour the order. Then what are we waiting for? Activate Force Devour. Yi Xian waved his hand and an incomparably powerful suction force suddenly exploded out. The third eye on the foreheads of the four-eared half-humans was actually directly taken away by Yi Xian. Ding! Force Devour successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Divine Thought-Sharing Order. The Divine Thought-Sharing Order allowed the host to temporarily share their divine thought with a designated target. According to the host's mastery of the order, the number of Divine Thought-Sharing Order targets would increase. Currently, the host can share 2 targets. A trashy order. Yi Xian could not help but think. Indeed, this order was trashy. At least that was what Yi Xian thought. The divine beasts had not appeared and the order had been devoured. What should he do with the four-eared half-humans? Wei Zhantian, kill them! Yi Xian waved his hand and the god-slaying sword rushed out. Beams of light appeared. Wei Zhantian had finally used the god-slaying slash. Since these people had attacked Yi Xian, there was no need for Yi Xian to let them go. After all, if Yi Xian let them go this time, they would only do worse next time. Chapter 2348. After killing the four-eared half-human race assassins, Yi Xian was a little confused. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. This was the Kunlun realm. Who could arrange for people to kill him in the Kunlun realm? The Li family? No matter how much the Li family hated Yi Xian, they couldn't be so presumptuous. After all, this was the Kunlun realm. Making a move here was equivalent to directly challenging Mi Li's authority. Unless the Li family wanted to betray the Kunlun realm, they wouldn't dare to do so. If it wasn't the Li family, who could it be? Could it be the Annihilation Organization? Could it be that the Annihilation Organization had made a comeback so quickly? Yi Xian had never seen the four-eared half-human race in the Kunlun realm before. It was very likely that they were from another realm. How could a race from another realm be arranged to infiltrate the Kunlun realm to assassinate Yi Xian? Clearly, the person or force that wanted to make a move on Yixian was no ordinary person. Did the Annihilation Organization have that much power? That old man? That old man who had suddenly brought Yixian to the Kunlun realm and stopped Yixian from continuing to search for the inheritance of the God Emperor? That was impossible. If that old man wanted to kill Yixian, he could do it with a single breath. Why would he use so many tricks? Yixian fell into a state of confusion. Yixian couldn't understand the four-eared half-human race's assassination this time. Why? However, no matter the reason, no matter who wanted to assassinate Yixian, Yixian only knew that if he didn't quickly improve his strength, it would be very troublesome. Forget it. I'll go to the Divine Talisman race to see Fian and the others first. Yixian thought, then quickly left. At this time, Xianxia's Divine Talisman race wasn't very peaceful. It turned out that they had a group of guests, a group of destitute guests. At this moment, Elder Fu Yi was sitting with another elder, discussing countermeasures. This elder was called Elder Fu Fa, and he was the Grand Elder of the mysterious Divine Talisman race. Just a few months ago, the mysterious Divine Talisman race was invaded by a huge force, and they were almost wiped out. The mysterious Divine Talisman race was not as powerful as the mysterious Divine Talisman race. There were less than 300 mid-level Divine Talisman Masters and above in their entire race, so it could be said that they were killed in an instant. Grand Elder Talisman spell had only brought the last hope of the mystic strange Divine Talisman race, 500 children. That's what happened. Our Xianxia Divine Talisman race only exists in name. Great Elder Fu Yi, this time, the relationship between our races has been good for generations. You have to save my Xianxia race's last hope. My race is willing to offer our race's talisman and become a vassal of the Xianxian race. Don't say that. Elder Fu Yi, back then, when the Xianxian clan was in trouble, it was the Xianxia clan that saved us. This time, even if you didn't say anything, the Xianxian clan would do our best. Don't worry, I will immediately send someone to invite the honorary Grand Elder back. I believe he will have a way. Honorary Grand Elder? Since when did your Xianxian clan have an honorary Grand Elder? However, at that moment, a clansman suddenly ran in. Grand Elders, Grand Elder Yixian is back. Haha, quick, invite Grand Elder Yixian over. I didn't expect him to come back at such a crucial time. Fu Yi was very happy. After all, once Yixian came back, Fu Yi felt a lot more relieved. After Fian and the others came over, those kids naturally couldn't hold back and told them what they had seen and heard. Among them, what Fu Yi cared about the most was that Yixian actually knew the divine master of the Kunlun God domain. Furthermore, the princess of the Kunlun God domain was actually a good friend of Yixian. With such a background, Elder Fu Yi naturally trusted him very much. As soon as Yixian came back, he was invited to Grand Elder Fu Ye's side before he could find Fian. After a brief introduction, Yixian found out what had happened. Yixian frowned slightly. The enemy of the Divine Talisman race was at least in existence on the same level as the Divine Talisman race. Yixian wasn't very sure, but since Fu Yi had said that the Xianxia race and the Xianxian clan had been friends for generations, Yixian couldn't refuse. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for triggering the random chain hidden mission. Trouble with the Xianxia race. The system notification sounded. Yixian was stunned. It was actually a random chain hidden mission. Once a random chain hidden mission was completed, the rewards wouldn't be too low. It seemed that Yixian had to be more careful this time. Alright, I understand. Grand Elders, reinforce the clan's defenses first. Grand Elder Fu Fa, please send a clansman to take me to your clan to take a look. I want to see who this enemy of yours is. Alright, thank you, Grand Elder Yixian. Soon, a young man from the Xianxia Divine Talisman race led Yixian to the territory of the Xianxia Divine Talisman race. The territory of the Xianxia race was like that of the Divine Talisman race. It was very well hidden. Without a guide, it would be very difficult for Yixian to discover it. Soon, Yixian arrived at the territory of the Xianxia race. After breaking through the restrictions, he saw a dilapidated mountain village. The village had been completely massacred. It could be said that all the people left behind by the Xianxia race were dead. However, what caught Yixian's attention were some corpses on the ground. 4 ears corpses. 4 ears. Was it a coincidence? Or had it been premeditated? Why had Yi Xian been attacked by the four-eared half-human race in the Kunlun territory? Why had the Xianxia divine talisman race encountered the four-eared divine beast here? Was it really just a coincidence? Come, let's go back first. Yi Xian was about to leave with the young man when a voice rang out. Since you've come, why are you leaving so quickly? Following this sentence, at least 100 figures appeared in front of Yi Xian. This place was actually a trap. The four-eared half-human race. It really was the four-eared half-human race. Although not all of them were four-eared half-humans, at least a third of them were. Who are you? Yi Xian looked at these people and asked calmly. Haha, you're asking who we are? Aren't you the Xianxia divine talisman race's honorary grand elder? How could you not know us? A mocking smile appeared on that person's face. Could it be that they were actually targeting the Xianxia divine talisman race? Not good. Yi Xian was alarmed. Clearly, these 100 people weren't all of the enemies. Then, where had the rest of the enemies gone? There was only one possibility. The Xianxia divine talisman race. Damn it! Yi Xian was vexed. Without any explanation, he grabbed the young man next to him and activated the space law's infinite teleportation. In an instant, Yi Xian's figure disappeared, even though these people could sense Yi Xian's path. But how could they keep up with the speed of infinite teleportation? System, don't worry about the consumption of resources. Hurry back to the Xianxia divine talisman race at full speed. Chapter 2349. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Just as Yi Xian had expected, countless divine beasts were attacking the Xianxia clan's protective barrier. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. In the sky and on the ground, there were millions of divine beasts that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. This was a terrifying number. After all, Yi Xian had never participated in such a large-scale battle since entering the divine realm. These were all gods. Within the barrier, the Xianxia divine talisman clan seemed so weak. Even though all the old and young were mobilized, they were severely understaffed. Fortunately, the Xianxia divine talisman clan's protective barrier was defensive, so they could still hold on. Loopholes kept appearing in the barrier, but they were immediately filled up. However, if this continued, the barrier would be breached sooner or later. Wei Zhantian, in your magic treasure form, open a path for me. Yi Xian suddenly shouted, and Wei Zhantian appeared instantly. The two god-slaying swords swam around Yi Xian. Any divine beast that dared to approach Yi Xian was killed immediately. Yi Xian did not delay at all. After all, in a battle of this level, not to mention divine sovereigns, even divine kings and divine emperors might appear. If Yi Xian could not break through quickly, it would be a tragedy. Fortunately, Yi Xian did not know whether it was because he had chosen a good place to break through, or because he had deliberately let him in. In any case, Yi Xian entered safely. Young master, you're back. As soon as Yi Xian entered the barrier, Fian appeared beside Yi Xian. Girl, what's going on? Why are there so many divine beasts attacking the Xianxia divine talisman clan? Young master, I don't know either. You can ask Fu Yi and Grand Elder Fu Fa. Yi Xian nodded, put down the young man in his hand, and walked forward. Yi Xian had to figure out what was going on. Obviously, Yi Xian was also implicated in this matter. Those four-eared half-humans who tried to assassinate Yi Xian in the Kunlun realm might have done so because Yi Xian was the Grand Elder of the Divine Talisman race. After asking a few questions, Yi Xian had a rough idea of what had happened. However, this answer was a waste of time for Yi Xian. According to what Fu Yi had said, the Divine Talisman clan possessed powerful divine talisman power, so it was natural for them to be spied on by other forces. So, it was normal for such a war to occur. It could be said that countless tribes of the Divine Talisman clan had already been annihilated. The reason for this was because the Divine Talisman race possessed the power of the Divine Talismans. In that case, Great Elder Fu Yi, do you know where those four-eared half-humans came from? Great Elder Yi Xian, this old man was just about to tell you about this. These four-eared half-humans all came from another divine domain. If this old man's guess is not wrong, these four-eared half-humans should be from the demon god's divine domain. Demon god realm. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. He had thought of Luo Luo. Wasn't Luo Luo trapped in the demon god divine dominion? If that was really the case, then this was an opportunity for Yi Xian to rescue Luo Luo. Alright, I understand. I'll go find Mi Yan and ask for reinforcements now. Yi Xian didn't waste any more time. After all, time was of the essence now. However, just as he was about to activate the wings of the gods, he stopped. Great Elder Fu Yi, I have some ancient resources here. Think of a way to refine some powerful divine talismans. You must hold on until reinforcements arrive. After saying that, Yi Xian took out countless resources. These were all accumulated resources from the devouring space. Unexpectedly, Yi Xian didn't use them to raise his cultivation base or enhance his own strength. Instead, he gave them all to Fu Yi. Of course, to Yi Xian, Luo Luo was far more important than these resources. Great Elder Fu Yi didn't stand on ceremony. He immediately selected the elites of his clan and began refining the talismans. System: transfer all the energy of the wings of the gods to the nearest city with a teleportation formation. Ding! System notification. Host can only teleport to Huiwe City at most. Do you confirm? Confirm. As Yi Xian spoke, the wings of the gods activated. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian appeared outside Huiwe City. Look, is that Yi Xian? That's right, that's him. Go inform the family heads that Yi Xian is here. The 3 family heads have ordered that in order to avenge the Lin family, they must kill Yi Xian if they see him. All right. I'll go inform them. You take some people and stop him immediately. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several figures blocked Yi Xian's path. Yi Xian, how dare you come to Huiwe City? Humph, I'll make sure you don't leave today. Yi Xian frowned. He didn't have time to waste on these small fries. Yi Xian could guess that the 3 families had issued the order to kill him in order to subdue the remaining forces of the Lin family. Get lost. I'm not in the mood to waste time with you today. I'll kill anyone who dares to stop me. Yi Xian actually said that he would kill. Well, the 4-eared half-human tribe and Luolua's whereabouts were known. Then, the Xianxia divine talisman tribe was under attack. They could be in danger of being slaughtered at any time. Yi Xian couldn't care less. Haha, Yi Xian, who do you think you are? How dare you be so presumptuous? Men, arrest him. That person actually dared to issue an arrest warrant for Yi Xian. I told you to get lost. All of a sudden, Yi Xian's aura erupted. That powerful pressure swept across the entire Huiwe city. Some of the weaker true gods immediately knelt down on the ground in horror. What kind of power was that? It was incomparably powerful and filled with murderous intent. In an instant, the entire Huiwe city fell into chaos. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hundreds of figures rushed over. They were the people of the 3 families. Yi Xian, what are you trying to do? Do you want to make an enemy of the 3 families of Huiwe City? Yi Xian looked at these people anxiously. He only wanted to use the teleportation formation to leave as soon as possible. He didn't want to care about so much. So, without saying a word, he rushed out with the Godslayer in hand. Yi Xian only wanted to leave. Although he said that he would kill without mercy, it was only a threat. He didn't mean to start a massacre. However, there were those who didn't open their eyes. They just had to cause trouble when Yi Xian was so anxious. They were simply courting death. Kill him for me. Everyone, attack together. The patriarchs of the 3 families actually issued the order to kill Yi Xian. At the same time, a group of people had already blocked Yi Xian's path. How dare you? Yi Xian gripped the Godslayer tightly, his eyes already red. Finally, Yi Xian exploded. Even if there was a delay of 1 second, the Xian Divine Talisman tribe could be wiped out. Chapter 2350. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, Thousand Beast Sword Servants, Flower God Sword Servants, Withered Bone Sword Servants, Skeleton Summon, come out. Kill without mercy. Ding. System notification. Warning. Warning. Host has entered a berserk state. Host has entered a berserk state. Ding. System notification. Warning. Warning. Host has lost control of his thoughts. Severe warning. A series of system notifications rang out, but Yi Xian actually turned off the system notifications. At this moment, Yi Xian had already lost his mind. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGG. To his anticipation of Luoluo and his worry for the divine talisman race had caused Yi Xian to lose his mind. 1,000 beasts feast. Begin. 1,000 vines kill. Wei Zhentian, magic treasure form. Kill without mercy. Kill. 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 Boom. 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 The destruction happened in the blink of an eye. Thousands of beasts galloped and vines filled the sky. Yi Xian's berserk state caused Wei Zhentian to enter a berserk state as well. The two god-slaying swords scattered terrifying sword chi in the air. The entire Huiwei city fell into despair in an instant. However, even in such a state, even though Yi Xian had already lost his mind and was on a rampage, Yi Xian's attack didn't truly include the ordinary residents of Huiwei city. Regardless of whether it was Yi Xian himself or his god-tier mount, the targets of his attack were those who dared to block Yi Xian's path and attack Yi Xian. A terrifying aura spread throughout the entire Huiwei city. Countless people knelt on the ground, not daring to move. Some even wet their pants in fear. A god had actually been scared to the point of wetting his pants by Yi Xian. Yi Xian had only gone berserk for a few seconds, but in the sky, the disciples of the three great clans were falling down like rain. This was because they had all been killed by Yi Xian. The berserk aura caused the people around Huiwei city and the divine beasts around Huiwei city to flee in panic. Those who knew Yi Xian from the Radiant Moon School were already scared silly. Was this still the Yi Xian they knew? How could it be so powerful and so terrifying? Ding! System notification. The host is mentally unstable, forcibly using the divine sense interference ability. Ding! System notification. Increase interference. Ding! System notification. Interference failed. Forced use of illusion healing. The system had not given up, even though Yi Xian had blocked him. Fortunately, the system was now human-like enough. It knew that whatever Yi Xian was doing now had already lost Yi Xian's original intentions, so it kept trying to get Yi Xian to reply. Fortunately, the system succeeded. Ding! System notification. Host has recovered. Ding! System notification. The berserk state of the host has disappeared. Yi Xian regained his senses and smiled bitterly as he stared blankly at the mess he had created. Sigh, there were inner demons on the path of cultivation. Although Yi Xian did not have any inner demons because of the system, he had never expected that he would be affected by inner demons. Sometimes, people would really do some irrational things because they were too worried about the things they cared about. Wei Zhentian, come back! Yi Xian waved his hand, and the 1,000 beast sword servants and the others disappeared. Wei Zhentian also returned to Yi Xian's side. As for Qian Tang, he naturally kept it in his yin and yang ring. Sigh, forget it. These pitiful people. I will put them in the devouring space for now. Yi Xian waved his hand and collected the tens of thousands of corpses that littered Huiwei city. In less than a minute, the damage caused by Yi Xian could be said to be incomparably terrifying. Especially the area beneath Yi Xian's feet. It was completely turned into ruins. The people who had survived the disaster, regardless of what they had done or how they had viewed Yi Xian, were now prostrating themselves on the ground. They did not even dare raise their heads to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian immediately activated the teleportation array and left Huiwei city. However, even after he had left for a long time, not a single person in Huiwei city dared to stand up. Some people had even been scared to death by Yi Xian. It was unknown whether this was pitiful or sad. Of course, Yi Xian did not care so much. He rushed to the Divine Master Palace as fast as he could. Stop right there. Who are you? A group of Divine Master Palace guards blocked Yi Xian's path. Although Yi Xian was anxious, he did not dare to act rashly. He casually took out his identity token and said, "Hurry and inform Mi Yan. Tell her that I, Yi Xian, have an urgent matter to discuss with her. How dare you call the Divine Master by his name? You are courting death." Suddenly, a monstrous aura erupted. It actually had the intention of killing Yi Xian in one fell swoop. That aura was so powerful that Yi Xian was suppressed to the point that he couldn't move at all. Ding! Warning! Warning! Host has fallen into a desperate situation. Host has fallen into a desperate situation. A desperate situation. Yi Xian was terrified. Could it be that he had no other choice but to die here? Ri-wan-ar. Stop. A gentle voice sounded. It was Mi Yan's voice. This time, Yi Xian finally understood the strength of the Divine Master Palace. After all, this was the core area of the Divine Dominion. How could there be no experts? Mi Yan's figure appeared in front of Yi Xian. She smiled at Yi Xian and asked, Yi Xian, what happened to you? Why did you lose your composure? Divine Master, please send experts immediately. Enemies from the Demon God Realm have infiltrated our Kunlun God Realm. They are currently attacking the Divine Talisman race. There's such a thing? Mi Yan frowned slightly. This was too shocking. This was undoubtedly a declaration of war between the Divine Dominion and the Divine Dominion. It was undoubtedly equivalent to a war between two Divine Dominion. Where are the Divine Master Palace guards? Swoosh, swoosh. Countless figures appeared. They were the elite Divine Master Palace guards. Greetings, Divine Master. Immediately follow Yi Xian to provide support. Yi Xian, as the law enforcer of the Divine Dominion, you have full authority to deal with this matter. You can mobilize the Divine Master Palace guards and any forces around the Divine Talisman race that you mentioned. After saying that, Mi Yan threw a treasure to Yi Xian. This was equivalent to an official seal. It was the proof of Yi Xian's status as a law enforcer of the Divine Dominion. Of course, it also had other uses. Thank you, Divine Master. Yi Xian naturally wouldn't refuse and accepted it. The desperate situation just now left Yi Xian with lingering fear. At this time, Yi Xian didn't dare to be presumptuous in front of Mi Yan. Even if Mi Yan treated him very well, Mi Yan was the Divine Master, the master of this Divine Dominion. To the experts of the Kunlun God Realm, no matter who Yi Xian provoked, no one would care even if he went against them openly. However, if he dared to disobey Mi Yan, he would be courting death. Chapter 2351. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. It could be said that every one of them possessed incomparably powerful combat strength. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. There was no lack of godly venerables among them, and even the commander of the Imperial Guards was a low-level godly. The Arch. Strength was secondary. The most important thing was that every one of these 10,000 people had a noble status. A powerful background. Through the teleportation array again, Yi Xian teleported directly to Wuxia City. The people of Wuxia City had just recovered from the shock caused by Yi Xian, but once again, they were so frightened that they fell to the ground. An army of over 10,000 divine lords kept appearing through the teleportation array. This scene was simply enough to scare them to death. Although Yi Xian had rushed all the way through the teleportation array, the round trip still took a full day and a half. A day and a half was really too long for the Divine Talisman race of Xianxia. At this time, the Divine Talisman race of Xianxia Divine Talisman race's protective restrictions had been broken, and more than two-thirds of their warriors had died in battle. Elder Fu Yi led the remaining clansmen to defend the last territory of the race, using the Divine Talisman to resist with difficulty. It could be said that there was a possibility that they could be breached at any time. The million-strong Divine Beast army fought to launch wave after wave of attacks. The territory of the Divine Talisman race was blessed by the Divine Talisman tree, so it could be said that it possessed extremely powerful strength. However, no matter how powerful it was impossible for it to be invincible. Fortunately, at this time, Yi Xian appeared. Ri-wan-ar looking at the densely packed alien army, without Yi Xian's command, the Imperial Guards of the Divine Palace directly launched an attack. In an instant, the sky shattered, and the earth collapsed. Fierce battles could be seen everywhere. At the same time that the Imperial Guards of the Divine Palace appeared, an incomparably huge teleportation gate appeared in the sky. A teleportation gate from another divine realm. No, not just one. After the first one appeared, thousands of such teleportation gates appeared in the sky one after another. This was a war between the divine realms, and it was a well-prepared sneak attack. Perhaps their initial target was the Divine Talisman race, but when the Imperial Guards of the Divine Palace appeared, it meant that the war between the two divine realms had officially begun. The battlefield of the gods opened once again, and countless warriors had already poured into it. That was the main battlefield. On Yi Xian's side, it was just a small sneak attack. From the thousands of teleportation portals, mystical beasts and all sorts of strange demon god tribe members rushed over. In a short while, there were already tens of millions of them. If they really relied on these 10,000 divine palace forbidden guards, no matter how elite they were, they would most likely lose this battle. After all, the enemy's thousands of portals could provide countless reinforcements at any time. Almost unlimited support. A war in the divine realm was no joke. Not to mention a mere 10 million, even a 100 billion level war wasn't impossible. Yi Xian directly took out the magic treasure that Mi Yu had given him. This magic treasure was only a square imprint, but it possessed supreme authority. Yi Xian held the treasure and said loudly, "I am Yi Xian, and as a law enforcer of the divine realm, order that all sects, cities, aristocratic families, and so on, immediately come to my aid. The war in the divine realm has begun, and anyone who dares to disobey will have their entire family exterminated as a traitor to the divine master." Using the treasure as a law enforcer of the divine realm, Yi Xian's figure appeared in thousands of clans, sects, families, and cities. Following Yi Xian's orders, no one dared to disobey. Even Huiyue City, which had just been destroyed by Yi Xian, hurriedly dispatched its strongest reinforcements under the Radiant Moon School's command. Even the two sects that were fighting immediately put aside their hatred and joined forces to rush toward Yi Xian. A war in the divine realm. Once it started, there was only one result for anyone who disobeyed: extermination of their entire family. No matter who you were or what power you were, there was no chance of bargaining. A branch family of the Li family also received the order. Even if they saw that it was Yi Xian, they could only respectfully kneel on the ground and accept the order, dispatching the strongest elites of their family. This was a war in the divine realm. Once it started, everyone obeyed unconditionally. Of course, the powers that did not have the qualifications to accept the order could still do what they wanted. This was because they were too weak, so weak that they did not even have the qualifications to participate in the war in the divine realm. Just like Mo Beijing back then, countless figures constantly converged. It was like small streams converging to form a large river, which then converged to Yi Xian's side to form a great sea. Once the powers arrived, they would immediately enter the battle. This was something that they had to do without any orders. Although most of the war in the divine realm took place in the sovereign space, the war in the divine realm took place in the sovereign space. However, once the war in the sovereign space was lost, and the enemy was not satisfied with their gains and invaded the sovereign space, then there was only one result. The divine realm would be exterminated. Generally speaking, if the enemy did not take the initiative to invade the enemy's divine realm, then such a war would still be considered a regular war in the divine realm. Once someone entered, it could escalate into an ultimate war. What was the ultimate? You die, I die. That was the ultimate. Regardless of whether the demon god realm had intended to start an ultimate war in the divine realm at the beginning, now they were forced to do so. Slaughter. Endless slaughter. At this moment, life seemed so worthless. Even Yi Xian seemed so insignificant in such a war. Devour. Yi Xian casually waved his hand, and countless divine beast corpses were directly devoured by him. Ding! Host has broken through. Current level is first grade middle grade divine lord. Continue devouring. Countless divine beast corpses were devoured again. Ding! Host has broken through. Current level is first grade upper grade divine lord. Break through again for me. Ding! Host has broken through. Current level is first grade upper grade divine lord. It was actually a major realm, an upgrade of a major realm. But what was the use? Although Yi Xian had broken through to the peak divine lord realm in the blink of an eye, this was a war in the divine realm. Divine lord realm? That was just a joke. In that devouring just now, Yi Xian had devoured no less than 10 million divine beast corpses. But the enemies seemed to be endless, and they were still pouring in at a rapid pace. Divine Master Order. Suddenly, a figure appeared beside Yi Xian. All the guards around Yi Xian immediately knelt to the ground. Yi Xian naturally didn't dare hesitate. Yi Xian had already experienced Mi Yan's authority. Yi Xian believed that if he showed any signs of disobedience now, he would immediately be torn to shreds. Divine Realm Law Enforcer, Yi Xian, heed my orders. I hereby confer upon you 9 regional commanders. You will be in charge of 60,000 territories in 9 directions. Within 1 month, you are ordered to gather 1 billion true god soldiers and 1,000 divine lord generals and above. You are also ordered to select capable commanders to lead reinforcements to the sovereign god battlefield. Yes, Yi Xian, heed my orders. At this moment, only he knew the shock in Yi Xian's heart. 1 billion soldiers at the true god realm and above, 1,000 generals at the divine lord realm and above. It was just a matter of a single sentence. Chapter 2352. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. 9 provincial governors were in charge of 60,000 territories, but they had to deploy so many people. And this was only the beginning of the war. Kunlun God Domain had 3 million territories. Based on this ratio, wouldn't the first batch of 50 billion true God soldiers be deployed? 50 billion. Not 5,000, not 50,000, but a full 50 billion. But because of the difference in strength, these 50 billion true gods were just cannon fodder. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. In the Battle of the God Domain, on the battlefield of the Master Gods, the real battle still depended on the soldiers who had the power of laws. In other words, those powerhouses above the Divine Lord realm. Below the Divine Lord realm, because one didn't possess the power of laws, there wasn't much of a difference if one relied on special methods such as magic tools, runes, or runes. If one had enough runes or runes, then it was possible for an inferior true divinity to kill a middle true divinity. But once one reached the Divine Lord realm, because of the existence of the power of laws, the difference in realms was very clear. In the Master God realm, whether it was Divine Lord, Divine King, Divine Emperor, Divine Venerable, or even Divine Emperor, the division of each realm was very clear. Between each grade, each level, and each realm was very clear and distinct. At the Divine Lord realm, there was no chaos because of the power of laws. A high-level Divine Lord was a high-level Divine Lord. No matter how many Dharma treasures a low-level Divine Lord had or how strong the restrictions were, killing him was just a matter of waving his hand. A first-grade high-level Divine Lord realm powerhouse, even if he did not use Dharma treasures and only used his own power of laws, then even 100 low-level Divine Lords armed to the teeth would find it difficult to defeat him. As for a first-grade low-level Divine King, even if you had countless Divine Lords, it was impossible to defeat him. Because with the support of laws, unless it was a peak Divine Lord, a Divine Lord would not even be able to break through the defense of a Divine King. How could they win? Of course, having special Dharma treasures and special abilities was another matter. But to obtain a super Dharma treasure, how many people could encounter that kind of opportunity? Right now, Yi Xian hoped that his 9 directions 60,000 realms wasn't like the 100 realms of Mo and the 60 realms of Lin Feng. After all, transferring so many people wasn't a joke at all. Map! Yi Xian shouted loudly. Naturally, someone immediately brought the map to him. In the past, Yi Xian did not have any authority, so it was extremely difficult for him to obtain a map. But now, Yi Xian was a law enforcer of the God realm and also a provincial governor of the 9 regions. Thus, a map was just a matter of saying a word to him. Very soon, Yi Xian received the map. Of course, Yi Xian directly allowed the system to receive the 9 directions and 60,000 realms map. System, immediately come up with the most reasonable transfer plan. Ding. System notification. Calculating plan. Ding. Plan generated. Soon, a jade slip appeared in Yi Xian's hand. It was the proposal order. Men. Present. One of them went straight to Yi Xian. Ding. Target is a 6th grade upper divine king. In the past, Yi Xian would have immediately fled upon seeing a god king like this. But now, he was merely a messenger in front of Yi Xian. What is your name? I am Li Qing, the sect leader of the Huatian sect. All right, Li Qing. I command you as the provincial governor of the 9 directions to transfer the soldiers required by the Divine Master, according to the military order in this jade slip. Yes, I will obey. After receiving the spiritual tablet, Li Qing did not dare to delay any further and left with his disciples. With Yi Xian's orders, he could be considered a person who could do whatever he wanted in the 9 directions and 60,000 realms. You come here. Yi Xian casually pointed and another God King expert came to Yi Xian's side. Go and inform Kuan Buyu of the Kunlun God realm to bring his clan's elites and report to me immediately. Also, ask him to select 1,000 disciples from the Kunlun God realm who belong to the 9 directions and 60,000 realms. This, Lord Law Enforcer, the Divine Master has ordered that the Kunlun God realm disciples are not to be transferred unless absolutely necessary. What do you think? It doesn't matter. Kuan Buyu is my friend and I need his help. How about this? Tell Kuan Buyu to follow the principle of voluntary participation. As long as the Kunlun God Realm disciples are willing to come, they can come. If they don't want to come, don't force them. Yes, I will obey. Yi Xian knew that he was not the clan leader of a big family or the sect leader of a big sect. In the Kunlun God Realm, he was just a small figure. The only reason he had his current position was because of a single sentence from Mi Yun. Although none of these generals dared to disobey Yi Xian's orders, they all looked down on Yi Xian from the bottom of their hearts. Therefore, Yi Xian wanted to use a Kunlun God Realm disciple like Kuan Buyu. These disciples might be young and might not even know how to lead troops, but Yi Xian could assign them deputy generals. Yi Xian wanted people who would listen to him. No matter how high their status was, these people did not have a military position. A military position in the Kunlun God Realm was not something that could be obtained just because you were a disciple of a big family. Therefore, Yi Xian believed that they would definitely listen to his orders. Moreover, these disciples all had powerful factions behind them. With them indirectly commanding them, Yi Xian would be able to relax a lot. From today onwards, strictly speaking, Yi Xian could be considered a Lord God. Because with a single sentence from Mi Yun, Yi Xian was given command of the 60,000 territories. Moreover, as long as Yi Xian did not make any mistakes, once the war was over, the 60,000 territories would probably be given to Yi Xian directly. After all, Mi Yun was the Lord God of the Kunlun God Realm. Her words were the highest law in the Kunlun God Realm. No matter what Yi Xian's previous identity was, as long as he received Mi Yun's approval, he would be the legal Jiufeng 60,000 territories military governor. Ri 1 R. Jiufeng 60,000 territories military governor. Heed my orders. Suddenly, another figure appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. Didn't the order to mobilize troops just come? Why is there another order now? Yi Xian, heed my order. However, Yi Xian did not dare to disobey and hurriedly replied. God Realm's 10,000 Spirit Envoy Order. Jiufeng Provincial Governor Yi Xian is to immediately dispatch troops to the Lord God Palace to receive military provisions, 1 billion totem beasts, and 1 trillion God crystals. Yes, Yi Xian, heed my order. Alright, so it was to receive military provisions this time. System, what's going on? Why are there military provisions? Ding! System notification. According to the Kunlun God Realm's military order, the various factions have dispatched troops. The various provincial governors are also in charge of providing military provisions, totem beasts, and treasures. It is recommended that the host immediately choose a suitable location to build his own God Realm's provincial governor palace. It is also recommended that the host set up the necessary equipment for crafting weapons and medicine sections. So that's how it is. That made sense. He, Yi Xian, had no foundation. The other provincial governors had their own palaces. In the event of a war, they could naturally immediately mobilize troops. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not have anything. The God Realm's 10,000 Spirit Envoy was giving Yi Xian some funds. 1 billion totem beasts and 1 trillion God crystals might sound like a lot, but this was for Yi Xian to build his own palace. It could be said that it was not enough at all. Not to mention other things, Yi Xian was going to mobilize 1 billion troops this time. At the very least, Yi Xian would have to send out 100 million totem beasts to support him, right? One had to know that the people sent out by Yi Xian would receive military merits from Yi Xian. If his people were all dead, he would have to ask Yi Xian for more. If he did not make his own troops stronger, how would he receive military merits? Fortunately, Yi Xian had been a monarch before. This kind of thing was not difficult for Yi Xian. Fian, take Great Elder Fu Yi and select 100,000 troops to receive the resources. Be careful on the road. Although this is the God Realm's war period, it is inevitable that there will be villains causing trouble. Yes, young master. I understand. This was Yi Xian's foundation for building his own palace. Of course, Yi Xian would send his most trusted people over. Yi Xian was constantly making arrangements while the battle outside was still going on in the dark. The Xianxia Divine Talisman clan had been rescued, but Yi Xian did not give them any time to rest. He could only make them start refining divine talismans on the spot. He had no one but the Xian Divine Talisman clan at his disposal. Thus, he could only refine a large number of restrictions. Although Yi Xian had the right to mobilize troops from all over the 60,000 territories, he could not ask them to donate their assets. As for taxes, it was still too early. He had only just taken over. How could he get taxes so quickly? A multitude of matters suddenly erupted in an instant. Chapter 2353. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. However, Yi Xian was still very worried. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. He was afraid that it would be difficult for him to be the Jiufeng provincial commander. The demon god domain was attacking him, and the Annihilation Organization was ready to make a move. How could Yi Xian have an easy time? His subordinates also needed to be integrated. Fortunately, the system was helping to formulate a plan, so Yi Xian's actions were not slow. Ding! System notification. Due to special events, the random chain mission, the mysterious strange tribe's trouble has been forcibly interrupted. Ding! System notification. Host, please take note. Host has obtained the position of law enforcer in the Kunlun God domain, an official position in the Jiufeng 60,000 realms, and automatically obtained the qualifications of a Lord God in the Jiufeng 60,000 realms, and can directly extract faith points from the Jiufeng 60,000 realms. Ding! System notification. Host has obtained the position of law enforcer in the God domain, rewarded 3 eternal points, a special military order, a special treasure, the rule divine bow, and fully unlocking the sect subsystem. Ding! System notification. Host has obtained the position of law enforcer in the Jiufeng 60,000 realms, rewarded 2 eternal points, a special military order, a special treasure, the god-slaying helmet, and automatically unlocking the military subsystem. A series of notifications burst out in an instant. He had obtained an official position and could also receive rewards. Yi Xian couldn't wait to hug the system and kiss it. The system's rewards were like timely rain. However, obtaining 2 official positions and commanding 60,000 realms only gave him 5 eternal points. How difficult was it to obtain eternal points? Fortunately, with the qualification to extract faith points from 60,000 realms, as long as Yi Xian worked hard, he would definitely reap a lot of benefits. However, what were special military orders and special military orders? Yi Xian brought up the panel and looked at it directly. Special military order. Host can use special military orders to summon 100 million true god soldiers or 100 divine lord soldiers. Was this tailor-made for Yi Xian to transfer soldiers? However, Yi Xian had already sent Li Qing to buy it. It seemed that this thing could only be used to establish Yi Xian's personal guards. Special decree. Host can use the special decree to establish a special organization, including the crafting school, the forbidding school, and so on. After use, resources and manpower will be summoned. These 2 special tokens had come at just the right time. However, Yi Xian was not in a hurry to use them. He wanted to set up his sect system first. After all, he would be able to obtain more benefits from the sect system. Moreover, after establishing the sect, Yi Xian could very well use that place as his own God Realm Law Enforcer Palace, so there was no need to waste any extra resources. Now, if he could save a little, it would be better to save a little. Build it at this location? Of course, Yi Xian wouldn't. After all, this was a battlefield. Since the initial arrangements had been made, it was time for Yi Xian to focus on dealing with these invaders. Follow me! At Yi Xian's command, everyone quickly followed Yi Xian into the sky. At this time, the war was still going on. It could be said that such a battle in the wild was basically a battle of people. Yi Xian had a steady stream of reinforcements coming in, but the enemy was also constantly coming in through the teleportation portals in the sky. Yi Xian knew that the first thing he had to do now was to destroy those teleportation portals. Men, pass down my orders. Attack the teleportation portals with all your might. Focus your attacks on them and destroy those teleportation portals. As long as the teleportation portals are gone, I want to see how the enemy reinforcements. Yes, sir. Yi Xian did not even know who his subordinates were, nor what their positions were. Fortunately, the system could help him organize, so there was no need for Yi Xian to worry too much. Yi Xian was not idle either. He naturally would not miss out on such a battle. Therefore, Yi Xian also charged into the battlefield at this time. The 2 god-slaying swords circled around Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yi Xian took out the rule god bow that he had just obtained. Rule God Bao automatically generates different rule arrows according to the rule power used by the host. The power of the rule arrows depends on the host's mastery of the rule power. Rule God Bao's special attribute 1. Automatic upgrade. Based on the number of times the Rule God Bao is used, the Rule God Palace's level will automatically increase. The higher the level, the more powerful a number of rule arrows it generates. Currently, the host can only generate one red Rule God arrow. The Rule God arrow's power is divided into 7 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. Red is the least powerful, while purple is the most powerful. At the same time, at most, the Rule God Bao can generate 7 Rule God arrows at the same time. However, the 7 Rule God arrows cannot contain the same amount of rule power. Rule God Bao's special attribute 2. Rule control. Every time the host uses the Rule God Bao, the host's mastery of the Rule God arrow will automatically increase according to the number of Rule God arrows that are generated. What an awesome Rule God Bao! Yi Xian liked it very much. This Rule God Bao was many times more powerful than the god-slaying swords. Even though there were only 2 special attributes, these 2 special attributes complemented each other perfectly. Moreover, their power was even more explosive. Now that Wei Zhentian could control the god-slaying swords, Yi Xian was worried about not having a suitable weapon. Now he could get whatever he wanted. Haha, let me try out the power of my new treasure. Yi Xian suddenly pulled on the Rule God Bao and shouted at the same time, "Devouring arrow!" After all, Yi Xian was most familiar with the rule of devouring right now. A red arrow appeared on the Rule God Bao. Yi Xian could clearly feel the aura of the rule of devouring coming from it. However, before Yi Xian could attack, he heard the enemy's shouts. "Quick, over here. There's a high-ranking official of the Kunlun God domain here. Kill him and you'll be rewarded greatly. Charge, charge." Holy shit! They could see through my identity. Yi Xian turned the Rule God Bao around and shot an arrow at those people. In an instant, a 1,000-meter-wide vortex appeared in the sky. Enemies were constantly being sucked into it, but at the same time, some of his own people were also being sucked in. Yi Xian could feel the anger of the warriors beside him. However, because of Yi Xian's special identity, no one dared to complain. Moreover, Yi Xian's arrow had indeed wiped out hundreds of enemies. Holy shit! I forgot that this devouring arrow doesn't differentiate between friend and foe. Yi Xian said softly, annoyed. However, the power of this Rule God arrow made Yi Xian very happy. Even the god-slaying sword could not achieve this kind of attack power. Of course, this was also because the people in front of Yi Xian were just profound God Realm and true God Realm shrimps. Perhaps it would not be so easy to deal with enemies with higher cultivation bases. Chapter 2354. Suddenly, Yi Xian thought of the law of divine talismans. He wondered what would happen if he used the law of divine talismans. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD Xian drew his bow once again. Re-1 our law of divine talisman arrow. Ding! System notification. If you want to use law of divine talisman or law of restriction arrows, please add a specific law of divine talisman. Ding! The more powerful the law of divine talisman is, the more powerful the arrow will be. There was such a restriction? However, this was still within common sense. Fortunately, it was not difficult for Yi Xian to refine law of divine talismans. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then made a forbidden flight talisman. A forbidden flight talisman had a similar effect as a forbidden flight talisman. It used a special power to suppress a certain area, so that no one could fly within that area. This time, Yi Xian had the experience of the first arrow. He shot an arrow directly into the enemy's crowd. In the blink of an eye, the arrow reached the enemy's crowd. In an instant, the law of divine talisman arrow exploded, causing hundreds of enemies to fall. Good. Yi Xian could not help but applaud the law of divine talisman arrow. However, after shooting those 2 arrows, Yi Xian changed all of them to healing talismans. All injured, fall back and gather. Yi Xian shouted. Although they did not know what Yi Xian was going to do, many of his subordinates obeyed his order. Yi Xian suddenly drew his bow and shot an arrow. The soldiers' eyes were filled with fear. Even many of the surrounding people looked at Yi Xian with anger. They thought that Yi Xian was going to kill the injured. However, a moment later, a divine power erupted and the injured soldiers quickly recovered. Everyone's expressions changed as they looked at Xian. What was going on? What kind of treasure did their law enforcers use? One moment, they devoured everyone without distinguishing between friend and foe. The next moment, they restricted the air. And now, they even healed everyone within range? How did they do it? Those who have recovered, continue to kill the enemy. Those who are injured, come and assemble. Xian could only take care of a small part of the battlefield. However, he was currently leading a team to attack the enemy's teleportation portal. It could be said that every healing session gave Xian a slight advantage. The continuous accumulation of advantages would naturally have a huge impact on the battlefield. Be careful, my lord. Suddenly, a god king beside Xian roared and appeared beside Xian. Along with his shout, an incomparably sharp tail suddenly attacked. Ding! Target has been identified. 3rd grade Lower Divine King Realm Demon Celestial. Sting Demon Celestial. Ding! The Wasp Stinger Demon God can augment its tail with a special ability that allows it to shoot its target at an extremely fast speed, dealing extremely high critical damage. Boom! With a loud explosion, the God King expert standing beside Xian was knocked back, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it! Isn't this Wasp Stinger Demon Celestial a little too overbearing? That attack is simply too strong. Xian teleported to the God King's side, and a ball of light gathered in his hand. It was the healing ability of the Divine Blossom Sword Servants. The light circled around the God King, allowing him to recover quickly. Thank you, Lord Provincial Governor. Xian was a God Realm Law Enforcer, and a Provincial Governor of Jianghu. Logically speaking, a God Realm Law Enforcer had a higher status. However, most people were more used to calling Xian a Provincial Governor. This was because the Provincial Governor represented the authority of the Overgod of Jianghu. Of course, once they acknowledged Xian, they would directly address Xian as Lord Divine Master. It was just like how the people of Kunlun would directly address Mu as Lord Divine Master. In fact, in other places, if they had an official position, they would also address the Overgod as Lord Divine Master. However, Xian still had a long way to go before he could gain the acknowledgement of the 60,000 territories of Jianghu. I should be the one thanking you. If it weren't for you, I would have died without a doubt. Xian said sincerely. After all, a battlefield was a battlefield. This was a God Realm war, not a small skirmish like Xian's. A single person's strength would appear so weak. Even if you were a God King and had the battle strength to kill tens of thousands of ordinary mystic gods in a single move, you would still be a God King. However, even if you were a God King, the enemy also had God Kings. Therefore, if a single God King went out, the enemy could very well have a whole bunch of God Kings rushing over. A God Realm war wasn't something that could be resolved with just a few high-level combatants. Even a God King like Mu didn't have the ability to resolve a war by herself. It could even be said that if Mu really joined the war without the support of her subordinates, she would only be ground to death alive. This was a God Realm war. Of course, a battle between experts would still have a huge effect on morale. Thus, one-on-one duels were a common occurrence in God's domains wars. For example, at this moment, an enemy from the demon God realm stood out and said loudly to Xian, "Who dares to fight with me?" Obviously, he saw Xian and deliberately came to provoke him. System, detect that person's strength. Ding. System notification, target is a 3rd grade mid-god king. A 3rd grade mid-god king. System, detect the experts around me and choose an expert above the 3rd grade mid-god king realm to come out. Ding. System notification, detecting target. Ding. A suitable target has been detected. After the system notification, Xian immediately looked at that person. Do you dare to fight? Xian didn't hesitate and directly asked that person. Why wouldn't I dare? That person stood out and flew forward for a distance. Then he said to the expert from the demon god realm, I am the city lord of Dongfeng City, Lu Hanshan. A mere demon god dares to challenge me. Tell me your name. Humph, puny human, you overestimate yourself. I am the chief of the Sangha tribe, Sangha. Despicable humans, die. Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry because he felt that this kind of one-on-one battle was really boring. However, this was the rule of the God Realm War after all, so he couldn't say anything. Retreat. Make space. An expert from the demon god realm shouted loudly. At the same time, Yi Xian waved his hand. Both sides immediately leaped into the air. Lu Hanzhan and Sang Ha had already started fighting. Cloud movement. Cloud separation. Lu Hanzhan punched out, and in an instant, he transformed into thousands of people. The sky was densely filled with people, and they attacked Sang Ha. Just the law of clouds? What can you do to me? Thousand Lightning Soul Lock. In an instant, thousands of divine lightning suddenly appeared, but these divine lightning balls were in the shape of balls and had the ability to judge the soul. Therefore, they directly ignored Lu Hanshan's clones and attacked the real body. Cloud movement, gather. Lu Hanshan gave up on attacking, and suddenly countless clones gathered around him, forming a divine shield. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous explosions sounded.